לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי, והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי, ננאי 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 נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי, והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי, ננאי 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 נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות. אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם.
יצאתי ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז. יצאתי ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז. הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל משלותיו. הים ראה רעב ינוס, הירדן ייסוב לאחור. ההרים רקדו חלים, גבעות כבני צאן. יצא ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעם לועז. מה לך הים כי תנוס, הירדן ייסוב לאחור. ההרים תרקדו חלים, גבעות כבני צאן. מלפני אדון לכו לי ארץ, מלפני אלוה יעקב. החופי הצור, הגמלים, חלמיש למעיינו מעלים. ברוך אתה השם אלוהינו מלך העולם.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom everybody, and Chag Amatzot Sameach. This is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and we are going to do our weekly Shabbat Torah study. We'll continue this week. We've been studying the book of Leviticus, so there actually is no official parsha. There's an official parsha, but it's out of order. according to the Ashkenazi rabbinical calendar. So we'll continue studying Leviticus. We've been studying the sacrificial system, trying to understand it as a whole, complete system, and we'll continue that today, starting in Leviticus chapter 7. So let's just talk very briefly about Chag HaMatzot, about the festival of unleavened bread. We're in the middle of it right now. So according to the new moon observation and the Aviv observation, let me just get the exact dates up here in front of me. 1 second, please. Where do we go? There we go. So we started Chag HaMatzot at sunset on Tuesday. That was April 23rd. It will end after sunset on Tuesday, the 30th of April, which means that the seventh day of Chag HaMatzot starts Monday, the 29th of April, at sunset, and ends on Tuesday, the 30th of April, after sunset. And I always say after sunset because there is this intermediate period called Ben Arbayim, between the evenings, which really means the mixing time between day and night, what we call evening. And so I've come over the years to believe that the holidays, including Shabbat, actually end at the end of evening, at the end of the mixing time, what the rabbis might refer to as Tzeit Kochavim, when the stars start to come out, and basically when the sky reaches maximal darkness for that particular night. Okay, let's talk also a little about the Omer offering. So the Omer offering is to be brought Lemacharat Shabbat. There's only one Shabbat. Now, the Torah does not explicitly say which Shabbat we're talking about. And this is indeed one of the criticisms of the rabbis. I'm sorry, the criticism of the rabbis for the Karaites. They say there's no basis in the Torah to say that the Shabbat that's being spoken about, the day after which we're to bring the Omer offering, is mentioned explicitly, that it's not mentioned explicitly in the Torah. It does imply it because it's linked with Passover in Leviticus chapter 23. However, it doesn't say it explicitly, but this has been the Karaite understanding and the Karaite tradition. And for various reasons, which I won't get into right now, I don't think it makes much of a difference whether it's this Shabbat or one of the nearby Shabbats. It could be, since the Omer offering is the kickoff of the barley harvest, it's basically the first fruits offering of the barley harvest being the first harvest, the first major harvest in Israel in the springtime. Anyone who lives in Israel know that the barley ripens first, then the wheat, then you're going to get your summer fruits like the grapes, the figs, etc. Then you're going to get your fall fruits like the pomegranates and the olives, and concluding around Sukkot time. But at any rate, so this first fruits offering is really linked to the beginning of the harvesting of the barley, which is why it says when the sickle begins to be wielded against the standing grain, against the grains of barley. So it could be that another possibility is that whenever that barley harvest actually begins, that's the Shabbat after which we bring the Omer offering. But really, it's because the holiday of Chag HaMatzot, because the Passover offering and the holiday of Chag HaMatzot, we'll just call it informally, because the holiday of Passover falls about 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks after the barley reaches the state of Aviv. That means the barley is going to be ripe a couple of weeks later. I think it's fine to link it to the Shabbat that falls in between, or the only Shabbat that falls within the 7 days of Passover, and that's the way it's been traditionally done by Karaites. Okay, so to point out once again, there is only, since Passover is 7 days, it ends exactly a week later after it starts. Aside from the fact that it begins at sunset and then ends at the end of the evening, at what the rabbis might call the coming out of the stars, Tzeit Kochavim. But that means that Passover covers exactly 1 week, almost down to the minute or to the hour. And so therefore there will be only one Shabbat in those 7 days. It could be the first day, it could be the third day, it could be the sixth day, it could be the last day, but there will only be one Shabbat. There will only be one Monday, only one Thursday, only one Wednesday. Since it lasts exactly a week, there'll be one Shabbat within Passover. And that is the Shabbat, which, again, traditionally, and what we're following at the World Alliance of Qara'im and with the Biblical Calendar Society, that is the Shabbat, the day after which the Omer offering is to be brought. So that Shabbat is today. Today is Saturday, April 27th. That means that in ancient times, or in modern times, if we still had a temple or at least an altar or at least the ability to bring sacrifices. Well, this is not a sacrifice that gets thrown on the altar, but this is a wave sacrifice. But if we had the ability to bring sacrifices at least up to the Temple Mount, then we could bring the Omer offering, or if we did bring the Omer offering, it would be brought tomorrow, the day after the Shabbat, and that would start the kickoff of the 49-day count, culminating in that seventh Shabbat, the day after which, 50 days after that bringing of the Omer offering, 50 days inclusive, would be Chag HaShavuot, which is the holiday that represents the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Okay, so that's kind of the setup. So just to give so Brandon, I thought the moon was sighted on March 18th. No, you mean April 18th? I'm not sure what you're talking about. The moon was sighted on March 18th. I'm not sure what you're talking about. The moon this year, from all of the groups that do new moon observations, except maybe a couple of outliers, the moon was sighted, and let me just bring it up. I'll have it up right here. It was sighted on Tuesday, the 9th of April, 2024. Tuesday, 9th of April. Okay, that's when it was sighted. So yes, it was sighted in March. I don't think it was March 18th. I don't remember when it was in March, but there was no Aviv barley found at that point, so it wasn't declared the new month. Okay, so the moon was sighted. I can post a report, or actually, I'll just post a link to the report. If you go to World Alliance of Qara'im, then it'll be on the front page there of World Alliance of Qara'im. Okay, I can just post that right now. Hold on a second. Let's see. So if you just go to World Alliance of Qara'im. Where do we go? Well, you get it. www.worldallianceqaraim.org. It's you can find it easily. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so I'm not sure what you're talking about, Brendan. To be 100% honest. Any rate, so that's to place everything in perspective in terms of dates. Okay, and so with that being said, let's move on. So I'll start with, I guess, what I like to call my monologue. So I want to talk a little bit today about anti-Semitism, what it is and what it is not. I think there's a misconception of what anti-Semitism is. And people think incorrectly that anti-Semitism means rabid hatred of the Jews. And it is true that this is eventually what it will lead to. But that's not really the essence of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism isn't rabid hatred of the Jews. Anti-Semitism is the lack of belief that the people of Israel, that the Jewish people, are a special people, that they're a special nation, and the belief that the Jews have made this up for themselves to be able to dominate the world and to be able to, to essentially be the Übermenschen, because often we're compared to Nazis by these so-called anti-Semites, that we've made this up for ourselves in order to be number one, to get ahead in the world, and in order to basically control and dominate everything. So the essence of anti-Semitism, and I digressed a little bit there, but the essence of anti-Semitism is the lack of recognition that the people of Israel, that the Jews, are a special people. That's the essence of anti-Semitism. You don't have to say, I hate the Jews. It will eventually lead to that, and I'll explain why in just a couple minutes. But it's enough to say, I just think the Jews are just another people like anyone else, like the Greeks, like the Albanians, like the Chinese, like the Mexicans or the Mayans or whatever. They're just another people. And I don't hate Jews, but they're just another people. I love all people. I think all people are equal. We're all human beings. And the Jews are just another people, and I have no hatred towards them. And so I'm not an anti-Semite. I just just love all people. Okay, I see equivalence between the Jews and the quote unquote Palestinians. I feel sorry that what happened on October 7th, and I also feel sorry, and I'm not saying this, I don't feel sorry for what has happened in Gaza in the least. This is quoting people who are supposedly not anti-Semites but really are. I feel sorry for what happened to the Jews on October 7th, but I also feel sorry for the 30,000, probably not a true number, but the 30,000 Palestinians and all the babies and children that have been killed since then. This moral equivalence, this promoting of the idea that we're all the same, that there's no distinction between peoples, and that everybody is exactly the same, and that the Jews are not the chosen people, which they are, is enough to qualify as anti-Semitism. And I'll go into more details about this. And why will this eventually lead to actual hatred of the Jews? It may for a while just seem like, okay, well, it's not going to cause any damage. If that's what somebody wants to believe, then let them believe it. Why do they have to recognize the people of Israel as the chosen people by God? But eventually it will lead to hatred of the people of Israel. It will lead to hatred of the Jews. Inevitably, it will lead to hatred of the Jews because it doesn't mesh with reality. Because we as Israelites, we as Jews are going to continue to claim, rightfully so, that we are a chosen people. Does it mean that we are a different species than Chinese people or Mayans or ancient Greeks? No, we're all human beings, but we are the chosen ones of Yahweh. We're the ones who Yahweh chose to be his special envoys in this world, to be his special assistants, to be his Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, his kingdom of priests and his holy nation. And so we have a special status. Okay, and does that make a Jewish life more important than the life of someone else? Well, yes and no. It's true, we are all human beings. We're all made in the image of God. But on the other hand, the example I always like to give is, you could use the same analogy. Let's say someone walks into a, well, I'll give an even more simple analogy. Is it the same thing to kill? Let's say you had a criminal who decided he's going to go on a shooting spree, okay? And he just shoots random people in the street. This is obviously tragedy. It's horrible. It's murder. It's all this kind of stuff. But let's say now you have that same shooter and he says, I'm not going to go into the street and just kill random people. I'm going to target policemen. Well, we call them police officers today because I don't know what women are doing on the force, but whatever they are, we'll call them police officers. I'm going to target police officers, and he goes and he kills 10 police officers. Okay, is that the same as killing 10 random people on the street? Well, yes and no. A life is a life. The life of a police officer is a human being. The life of an average civilian, of an average citizen, is a human being. So yes, a life is lost. But there's something else going on there. The police officer has a special status within society. He's been appointed by the society to be the guardians. Of course, this doesn't always play itself out, especially in the United States of America, where the police are so violent and corrupt. But in theory, I'm speaking, okay, the police officers, they have a special status as representatives of the authorities, representatives of the government. In a certain sense, if the government is a righteous government, if the country is a righteous government, they're in a certain sense representatives of God. And to attack police officers specifically, who are there to protect other people, who are there to enforce the law, and to make sure that there is not chaos in the society, that's a little bit different from just going out and attacking random people on the street. Okay, that's the analogy I give. So, are the Jews different? Are the Israelites different? Are our lives worth more than the average person? Yes and no. On the one hand, yes, we're all human beings, as long as we continue to be moral. On the other hand, yes, in a certain sense, we are the loss of our lives, or the targeting of our lives, does have a different meaning and a different value than the targeting of just average or just random human beings in this world, because we are the people that are appointed by Yahweh to be his representatives, to be his envoys. In a certain sense, we wear his uniform. In the case of the Kohanim, in the case of the Kohanim, literally so, okay? A uniform that's ordained in the Torah. We read about that when we studied Exodus. And therefore, if someone goes out against the Jews, either to kill them or hurt them in any single way, they're in a certain sense not just hitting random, they're not just going out against, they're not just hurting random people, they're hurting the representatives of God, of Yahweh in this world. And in a certain sense, what they're doing is trying to hurt the representatives of Yahweh as a way to get back at Yahweh. What they really want to do is to hurt God himself. They can't. He's not part of this world. He's above and outside of this world. He doesn't have a physical presence in this world. Even his kavod, his glory that lives between the two cherubim on the ark cover, when it's there, is not a physical entity. Okay, you can't go shoot God, God forbid, in the chest or in the head, but you can go out and you can target his representatives, and you can hate his representatives, and by doing so, it's your way of rebelling against or showing your hatred and your rejection of Yahweh, of God. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and that is already enough to qualify as an anti-Semite. So another thing you could do is say, well, the Jewish people, the people of Israel, they're just average random people. They're just like Greeks or Chinese or Mayans or whatever. Okay, that also will eventually lead to that same anti-Semitism, or it is a form of anti-Semitism, because it doesn't recognize what Yahweh did in this world. It doesn't recognize the seder, the order that he placed in this world, where he decides what the role of each nation is. He decides for each nation, each race, each ethnicity, what their advantages are, what their disadvantages are, what their characteristics are, what their characteristics are not. He makes the different nations to have different characteristics, to have different looks, right? They look differently, to give them their own lands, and to give those lands for as long as he decides to give it to them. And then if he decides to take it away from them and give it to another people, as for instance he did when the American colonists conquered the United States of America. For whatever reason, Yahweh decided at that time it was time to take the land away from the American Indians, the quote unquote the Native Americans, and to give it to the European colonists. That was his decision. He took the land away and he gave it to another nation. Okay, so Yahweh is the one who makes distinctions among the nations. He makes order. In Hebrew we say seder. He makes an order out of things, and he decides what role each nation has, including and especially the people of Israel, the Jewish people. He has decided that the nation, the special nation that is close to him, that are his representatives, that are his envoys on planet Earth. We are to set up a society that represents his morality, not the morality hatched out of the minds of human beings, but his morality. And then we are to set up this model society in the land that he gave to us, in the land of Israel. And that society is to be used as a model by other nations, by all of the other nations around the world, to build societies of their own. And indeed it has. That's why the three major religions, or the two largest religions in the world, are derivatives of Judaism, right? Both Christianity and Islam, although they're distortions each in their own way of the Torah, are derivatives of the Torah of Moses. That's why they're called Abrahamic religions. Okay, so getting back to what we're talking about anti-Semitism, it's not. So if someone comes along and says, "I hate the Jews, I hate the Jews, I hate the Jews," obviously that is a rabid anti-Semite, unless, and I will give this, asterisk, unless what they're really saying is, I don't like the way the Jews are acting because they're not fulfilling their role. They've gone away from the Torah, and they have followed the ways of materialism and used their powers and their blessings to do things that they shouldn't be doing in this world. Okay, I can understand that, and maybe even there are people out there who feel this subconsciously and feel that the Jews are basically taking advantage of their powers, their closeness to Yahweh, by using it incorrectly for their own self-aggrandizement, rather than acting as the true messengers and envoys of Yahweh. And in fact, one could claim that that's really the source of all anti-Semitism, but I don't think it's the source of all anti-Semitism. I think it's the source of some anti-Semitism, but another major source of anti-Semitism, perhaps the major source of anti-Semitism, is the desire to go against the way that Yahweh set up the world, the way that Yahweh organized the world, and to replace it with ideas hatched by human beings as the way they think the world should be set up. And one of the main ways they do this is to do something that seems very innocent and very fair and very humanitarian, and that's to say that the people of Israel, the Jewish people, are the same as every other people. I don't hate the Jews. I don't love the Jews. We're all the same. We're all human beings. And by doing so, they are going against the way that Yahweh set up the world, because Yahweh made Israel a separated people, a special people, a chosen people, the people that are his firstborn, the people that are closest to him, and the people that have a special role within the the world, within the society of the world, just as the analogy or the example I gave before, just as policemen have a special role, even though they're human beings, just like, the fruit salesman down the block, they have police officers, they wear the uniform of the government, and they have a special role within that particular society. Okay, so that's the example that I would give. So be careful of people who say, oh, I'm not an anti-Semite. I like the Jews just as I like everybody else, but I don't recognize the Jews as a chosen nation. That right there is the roots of anti-Semitism. That is anti-Semitism because it goes against the way that Yahweh set up the world, and it seems very fair, very egalitarian, very nice. I love everybody. I love all human beings. I recognize everybody as the same. But essentially, what it's doing is it's breaking down the distinctions. It's breaking down the definitions and the distinctions, the order that Yahweh put into this world, and replacing it with what seems like a very nice idea, but an idea that ultimately leads to chaos. And what is the definition of chaos? The technical definition of chaos is the lack of order. Okay, tohu vavohu, that's spoken about in Genesis chapter 1, is essentially the similar idea or same idea as the Greek word chaos, and that means lack of order. Everything's the same. There are no distinctions between anything. And if you look at what the liberals, and I'll give the example of the United States of America, because maybe that's the most prominent example. If you look at what the liberals are doing in the United States of America, they're breaking down distinctions. Okay, there's no difference between anybody. There's no difference between what's the cat one? There's no distinctions between boys and girls anymore. Boys can be girls, girls can be boys. We're all the same. Boys can get pregnant. Females can have I don't even know what, right? It's gotten so distorted, right? So breaking down distinctions between what is a male, what is a female, breaking down distinctions between nations. Hold on a second, Shoshi boy, what's the matter? Come here, baby. Come here, sweetheart. Come, press. Okay, breaking down distinctions between nations and trying to mix them all together. This is what the United States is famous for. It's trying to take all of the people of the world and mix them all together, break down distinctions between people, pretend that all different races, ethnicities, peoples are exactly the same. There's no distinctions between them. And the idea being, we're going to break down distinctions. This is going to be the path to utopia. We're going to have one big happy family where everybody is exactly the same. No differences. What do you want, Joshi boy? No, you can't go out. Come here, baby. I'm sorry. I'll have to put it somewhere. Come here, Shoshi boy. Our cat is limping. I don't know. He must have injured himself a little bit, so he can't go out. Come here, sweetie boy. There you go. Try to relax, okay? I can't let you out right now. Okay. Maybe I'll put him. All right, let's try this again. Sorry, I was so rudely interrupted by the cat. So this is what the United States' attempt to achieve utopia. And it's a very flawed idea. It's an incorrect idea. And really, really, if you analyze it, what it is it's a rebellion against Yahweh. Yahweh made distinctions. He made distinctions between male and female. He made distinctions. Oh, God, I have to do something with cats. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on one second. What do you want, sweetie? You want to go out? Come here. One second. Cat problems. Okay, the cat is out. All right. So, as I was saying, making these, so Yahweh made distinctions, and human beings come along and they promote this idea of everybody's exactly the same. And this seems like a very egalitarian, nice idea, but really what it is it's the infusion of chaos. It's trying to undo the differences and the distinctions that Yahweh made when he created the nations and even when he created the earth. Because one of the things he did is he distinguished between light and day. It was all mixed together at the beginning. He distinguished between what's usually called the firmament or the water above the firmament and the water below the firmament. Okay, he distinguished between the sun and the moon. He distinguished between the different types of animals, the animals that inhabit the sea, the animals that fly in the air, the animals that inhabit the land. He made all of these distinctions. And that's really the beauty of Yahweh's creation, is that, yes, we all live together. We all share this earth. We all share this universe. But each group or each type has its own distinction, has its own place, has its own purpose, etc. And when you try to break that down, essentially what you're doing is you're trying to return the world from order to chaos. And the entire chapter of Genesis 1 is Yahweh making order out of chaos. And when you try to break down those distinctions, you're undoing the order and trying to return the world to chaos. Essentially what you're doing is you're trying to say, I know better than Yahweh. I have an idea of how the world should be set up. I have an idea of what utopia should be, and I'm gonna all of these ideas that are laid out by people who are loyal to Yahweh, the Jews, that there should be distinctions, that there should be differences, that the people of Israel are the chosen people. This is just primitive thinking. This is thinking that is not enlightened. This is thinking that doesn't have any relevance in the modern age, and this is designed by the Jews as a deliberate trick for self-aggrandizement, to make themselves special and different, and to rule over and to dominate the world. Okay, so I could go on for another 20 minutes about this, but I hope the idea is gotten across. And the main point I want to make is, if someone comes up and says I hate the Jews, okay, I would actually, in a certain sense, claim that is less of an anti-Semite, okay, because at least they're being honest, and at least they may have a reason. The reason behind them hating the Jews may actually be, well, the Jews are not doing their job. They're not fulfilling their mission in this world. That's the less dangerous type of anti-Semite, to be 100% honest. The most dangerous type of anti-Semite is someone who comes up and says, oh, I love the Jews just like I love everybody else. I think that all people are the same. I love all people, and I think we should all live together as one happy human family on planet Earth. That right there is the most dangerous type of anti-Semite. And ultimately, that is the type of anti-Semite that leads to, or that type of attitude is the type of attitude that ultimately leads to a desire to wipe out and destroy the Jews, because that same type of anti-Semite knows that as long as the Jews are around, or at least as long as the Jews are defining themselves and declaring themselves as a separate, as a different, as a special, as a chosen nation, then their theory that everybody is the same, that there are no distinctions, that we all live together as one big happy human family with no distinctions and no differences, that theory cannot exist. So the only way to make it exist is ultimately, when you can't convince the Jews to follow along with that theory, you may convince some of them, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time. You can fool some of the Jews some of the time, but you can't fool all of the Jews all of the time. When these people realize that the Jews will not go along with this vision of their world, at least some of them won't, the loyal ones, then ultimately the next step is to start to oppress, to persecute the Jews, and this can ultimately lead to expulsions, pogroms, holocausts, etc. Okay, I hope that all kinds of makes sense. So the next time you see somebody say, "Oh, I have," when somebody says, well, I think that, it's horrible what the Palestinians did on October 7th, but it's also horrible what the Jews have been doing to the Palestinians, oppressing them and running an apartheid state against them for the past 30 or 40 years. That right there is the most dangerous type of anti-Semite, not the type who goes out and says, I hate the Jews. And the reason I hate the Jews is because I'm disappointed in what they're doing, okay, or in the fact that they're not fulfilling their mission, okay? I hope it's clear. Like I said, I could probably go on for another 20 minutes describing this idea or describing my theory, but I hope I got the point across. Okay. All right. So with that being said, and I'll give you an example. Okay. I want to give you a concrete example. So I listen a lot to YouTube videos of, I won't say politics in general, but politics when it regards Israel and regards especially the current situation. You have a very nice guy, really well-meaning guy, Piers Morgan. Okay, he has his channel Piers Morgan Uncensored. I'm sure you guys all know who Piers Morgan is, and he always says, "Well, it's horrible what happened on October 7th, but it's just as horrible what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians for the past 20 or 30 years, and it's just as horrible what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians since October 7th." And so he tries to create a moral equivalence between the two, and he's a totally nice guy. I don't think he has a bone of anti-Semitism in him, and actually I think he actually really is kind of a good guy. But it's that kind of attitude, that kind of lack of distinction between what we are doing in the land of Israel and what we represent and what our enemies are doing in the land of Israel and what they represent, that lack of distinction, that moral equivalence that ultimately leads to anti-Semitism. Okay? Hope it makes sense. I hope it's kind of clear what I'm trying to say. So the next time you hear someone say, oh, I don't hate the Jews, but I think it's horrible what happened on October 7th. I think it's horrible also what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians, oppressing them for the past 50 years, then right there, this is the seed of anti-Semitism. Okay? All right. Let's move on and let's get into some Torah right now. We're in the book of Leviticus. Let me just bring it up. So beware the person who says, oh, I love the Jews just like I love everyone else. If you do not recognize the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, as a special, as a chosen people, you are an anti-Semite. You don't have to actively hate the Jews. You just have to not recognize the Jews, the people of Israel, as a special chosen nation, as a nation chosen as special envoys by Yahweh, who decides how the world works and how the world is organized and set up. That is already enough to qualify as perhaps the most insidious form of anti-Semitism. Okay, I think I've said the point enough many times over. Okay, so let me share the screen now. And we're going to kick it off in Leviticus chapter 7. So okay, so last week we finished, let me just leave it in the English for a moment here. So last week we spoke about Leviticus, or we studied Leviticus chapter 6. We finished off Leviticus chapter 6. Okay, I think before that, yeah, I think we started here. Leviticus chapter 6, verse 8. So these were more rules regarding the various offerings. So we've spoken about the 5 main types of offerings. Shabbat shalom, Martha. Shabbat shalom. We've spoken about the 5 main types of offerings. Does anybody remember what they are? Would someone like to type in the 5 main types of offerings, of sacrifices? It's real simple. Just look at the first couple of chapters of Leviticus. Okay, so I'm going to give the usual or the colloquial translations. The burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. So 5 main types of offerings. We've given them alternative names, which are more descriptive of what they are really meant to be. And now the cat wants to come back in. Let me let the cat back in. Excuse me, guys, for 1 second. I really don't want it to be outside. As I said, like a little bit. Come here. Come here. Come on. You can settle down. In. Come here, baby. Come on. Come on. Come on, Shusha. Come here, baby. There you go. Come, rest. It's the middle of the day. You're supposed to be resting. You're a cat. Cats sleep during the day. Didn't you learn that? Didn't they teach you that in cat school? You're supposed to be sleeping now. Okay. Shabbat shalom, James. Okie doke. So we spoke about the 5 main types of offerings. Now, we gave them more descriptive names. Let me just bring that up for a second. Where did that go? 1 second, please. Sacrificial laws. Okay, so the first type, which is usually translated as a burnt offering, in Hebrew it's an olah. We translate it as a holy burnt, but I'm actually going to change it because I realized something. I realized that people were thinking that when I said holy burnt, it meant holy, like holy, like sacred. But no, it means holy, like completely burnt. So we'll call it a fully burnt offering so as not to get mixed up between the word holy, meaning in whole, or holy meaning sacred. Okay, so it's a fully burnt offering or a Holocaust offering. As we mentioned many times, this is where you get the word Holocaust from. The word Holocaust, in other words, the thing that happened to the Jews during World War II, actually comes from a previous or a common translation of this fully burnt offering as a Holocaust offering. Hollow meaning whole, like complete, and cost meaning burnt. So what's the idea of a fully burnt offering? A fully burnt offering, the entire carcass of the animal is burnt on the altar except for certain pieces, unwanted pieces, which are discarded. Okay, and right here, head and the fat of the animal, the innards and the legs, and the innards and the legs, fully burnt offering. 1 second, skins the animal, fats and pecans, and the fat. So just the skin in this case, and I have to find it. Doesn't matter right now. Basically, the entire animal is burnt on the sacrificial altar. That's why it's called a fully burnt or a hollow, whole, cost, burnt offering. Okay, often translated just as a burnt offering. The next type is a grain offering, but it's a very specific type of grain offering. It's a grain offering where a portion of that offering is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice. So it's really a grain fire or grain by fire offering. There are other types of grain offerings, such as the one we spoke about just before, the Omer offering. The Omer offering is a grain offering. Okay, you bring an Omer, which is a bundle of barley, or it's a certain amount of barley, and you bring it to the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting, and you wave it. But you don't take any portion of it and throw it onto the altar to go up and smoke as a sweet-smelling scent to Yahweh. So yes, it's a grain offering, but it's not a grain offering by fire. Okay, so to be very distinct, what we're speaking about in Leviticus chapter 2 are grain offerings, but grain offerings where a portion of that offering is thrown on the altar of sacrifice and goes up in smoke. The third type is and in Hebrew that is a mincha. Okay, mincha really means a gift, but in the context of sacrifices, it means a gift of grain. Okay, the third type is shlamim, usually translated as peace offerings, but the translation we've been using is communion offerings. It's basically, as I like to say, they're kind of good offerings or positive offerings. It's kind of like thanking God or trying to come close to God or celebrating something. They're usually associated with good things. Okay. All right. The next two types are what we could call negative offerings. So the next type, which is called the hatat, is usually translated as a sin offering, but we saw that was a really poor translation. And what we've translated it as, and it's a mouthful, but it really describes the whole thing, is a recompense from inadvertent offense offering. If somebody has committed a sin, has transgressed one of the commandments of Yahweh inadvertently, and then later finds out about it, then they can bring this hatat offering, they can bring the sin offering to basically recompense for their mistake and to be forgiven and to be granted atonement for their mistake. Okay, and the fifth type is an asham offering, often translated as a guilt offering, but what it really is it's a recompense for financial transgression. So it's similar to a sin offering, a hatat, except it deals exclusively or almost exclusively with financial transgressions. So and it was broken into two different categories. The first was inadvertent financial transgressions against Yahweh. So for instance, you owe something to the temple and you fail to pay it, and then you realize later you have to bring a guilt offering, such as the tithes, is the example I gave. And the second type, and I think this is where here we go. So inadvertent failure to pay the sanctuary, that's the first type, or the first scenario in which you bring a guilt offering. And the second scenario is purposeful financial crimes against other people. And we saw in Leviticus 5 that a number of examples were given. So one of the examples that was given were sins involving a pledge. Okay, what does that mean? I loan a poor person $1,000, and I say I would like, until you pay the $1,000 back, I would like some collateral. So that person takes his only lamb that he has in his shed, and he says, "Take my lamb as collateral and please take good care of it and give it back to me when I pay you back $1,000. And then a couple of months later, the person comes back, the poor person comes back and says, here's your $1,000. Can I have my lamb back? And the rich person who lent him the $1,000 says, lamb? What lamb? I don't know what you're talking about. Lamb? Do you see a lamb? I don't see a lamb. You have any proof? Oh, you didn't take a video of it? I don't know. No lamb. That would be a deliberate financial transgression against another person, or an example of a deliberate financial transgression against another person. Okay, so those are the 5 main types of offerings. And again, to give motivation of why we're studying them, we see them throughout the Tanakh. We see guilt. We see all the different types of offering throughout the Tanakh. And if we understand what they are, what they're used for, what some of the laws are, what some of the rules are regarding them, then this puts a lot more context into our reading of the Tanakh. Okay, so then we went on to Leviticus 6. So Leviticus 6 actually was the end of the guilt offering, and then we went back to some rules regarding the offering. So we started again. The first offering that's mentioned in Leviticus chapter 1 is the burnt offering. Okay, maybe I'll just read this very quickly in English, just to summarize what we learned last week. So Yahweh said to Moses, give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. The burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar. So we know with a burnt offering, and remember, we're talking about a big animal, okay? And one of the laws that we saw regarding the burnt offering when we studied it originally, okay, it's either going to be a bull or a cow, or it's going to be a sheep or a goat. So especially in the case of a bull or a cow, then this is a big animal. And so it's left burning all day and all night on the altar. By the next morning, it turns to ash, and then the ashes are removed. That's what we see here in verse 10. The priest shall then put on his linen clothes. So here, it must remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar. The priest shall then put on his linen clothes with linen undergarments next to his body, and shall remove the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire is consumed on the altar and place them beside the altar. This is in the morning when the sun rises. Okay? Then he's to take off these clothes and put on other clothes and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonially clean. So in the morning, when the entire bull has been burnt to ashes, the Kohen takes these ashes, puts it next to the altar. Now he's all dirty because he's standing on top of the altar. It's like standing on top of a barbecue, right? Imagine walking around on top of a barbecue pit. He's all dirty. His white linen clothes have become all dirty. He changes his clothes. Then he takes the ashes that he put next to the altar and then brings them outside the camp to what's called the ash heap. The ash heap is a ritually clean or a ceremonially clean place outside the camp where we've seen a number of times that remains of animals are placed, and that's what happens to the ashes of the burnt offering. Okay, the fire on the altar must be kept burning; it must not go out. Okay, so the fire on the altar never goes out. Okay, and this is because burnt offerings are constantly being offered. So the fire on the altar must never go out. We spoke about the Ner Tamid, the eternal flame that you'll see in many rabbinical synagogues. And this is actually a misnomer or a mistake. It's meant to commemorate the eternal flame that you see like above the whatchamacallit, the Aron, the ark where they place the Torah scroll, is meant to commemorate the menorah that's in the holy area of the temple inside the tent of meeting. But that menorah doesn't burn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It actually is put out in the morning. It's put out and cleaned in the morning, and then it's lit again in the evening. So really the only thing that's burning all the time in the sacrificial system or in the systematized worship of Yahweh is the fire on the altar. The fire on the altar of Yahweh is to never go out, because this represents that Israel is continually serving Yahweh. It represents that Yahweh lives there and he's constantly being honored. He's constantly being given offerings and sacrifices. Okay. Every morning, the priest is to add firewood and arrange the burnt offering on the fire and burn the fat of the fellowship offerings on it. Okay, so the fellowship offerings, these are the second type of offering. That's what we call the peace offering or the communion offering. Here they translate as fellowship offerings. The fire must be kept burning on the altar continuously. It must not go out. So that means throughout all the hundreds of years that we were worshiping Yahweh, or especially once the temple was built, that fire was never ever supposed to go out. Okay. And when it is finally extinguished, then this represents the fact that Yahweh is no longer with us. He's no longer living among us. That for one reason or another, we were not able to keep up that requirement, or not able to keep up that what we'll call tradition, or that law of keeping a constant fire burning on the altar. Okay, now we go to the grain offering that we studied originally in Leviticus chapter 2. These are the regulations for the grain offering. Aaron's sons are to bring it before Yahweh in front of the altar. The priest is to take a handful of the finest flour and some olive oil, together with all the incense on the grain offering. And we said that incense is frankincense specifically, and burn the memorial portion on the altar as an aroma pleasing to Yahweh, right? So burn the memorial portion on the altar. This means that for all of these grain offerings, these grain fire offerings mentioned in Leviticus chapter 2, a portion is broken off, or a portion is taken of the offering and thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, the same place where all the animals are thrown, and it is burnt. So it is really a grain fire offering. There are other types of grain offerings, such as the Omer offering, such as the 2 loaves of wheat bread that are brought as the first fruits on Chag Shavuot, on the holiday of Shavuot, which are not thrown on the altar. They're just brought, or they're waved. Those are not the same as the grain fire offerings that are mentioned in Leviticus chapter 2. Okay, memorial portion, it means symbolic. It's actually kind of a poor translation. I mean, it's an accurate translation, but I don't think it really expresses what's going on there. You take a piece of it, and that is a symbolic, or that is a way of representing or commemorating the entire grain sacrifice. But a piece of it is thrown on the altar as a memorial or symbolic portion of the entire grain sacrifice. Okay, Aaron and his son shall eat the rest of it, but is to be eaten without yeast in the sanctuary area. So we said that all of the grain fire offerings, any grain offering that in which a portion of it is thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, must be unleavened bread. That's very relevant to us right now, because we're right in the middle of the festival of the holiday of unleavened bread, right? Okay, they're to eat in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. It must not be baked with yeast. I've given it as their share of food offerings presented to me. And again, this is in contrast to other grain offerings, which are not thrown on the altar, which may contain yeast, or which are indeed assumed to contain yeast, and such as the 2 loaves of wheat bread that are brought on Shavuot as the first fruits of the wheat harvest. No portion of that is thrown on the altar of sacrifice, and therefore it is leavened. It's leavened bread. Like the sin offering and the guilt offering, it is most holy. Any male descendant of Aaron may eat it. And so what does this mean, like the sin offering and the guilt offering, it is most holy? Well, you would think the sin offering is an animal, the guilt offering is an animal. This is just a piece of bread. You're throwing it on the fire. But no, this is just as holy. These grain offerings are considered to have the same level of holiness. They're considered one of the 5 basic types of sacrifices, one of the 5 basic types of offerings, and therefore they are kadosh kadoshim. They're holy of holies. They're most holy. Any male descendant of Aaron may eat it. For all generations to come, it is his perpetual share of the food offerings presented to Yahweh. Whatever touches them will become holy. Let's go on to verse 19. Yahweh said to Moses, this is the offering Aaron and his sons are to bring to Yahweh on the day he's anointed. So then we speak about the specific grain offering that is brought when a new high priest is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah, and an ephah is just a dry weight, okay, kind of like a bushel or a cup of flour, of the finest flour as a regular grain offering. Half of it in the morning and half in the evening. It must be prepared with oil on a griddle. Bring it well mixed, meaning the oil mixed with the grain, and present the grain offering broken in pieces as an aroma pleasing to Yahweh. The son who is to succeed him as an anointed priest shall prepare it. It is Yahweh's perpetual share, and is to be burned completely. So here it's not a memorial portion. It's not like a regular grain fire offering where a piece is broken off, thrown on the altar, and then the Kohanim eat the rest. This time, since it's an inauguration offering for the high priest, then the entire offering is thrown on the altar. Every grain offering of a priest shall be burnt completely. It must not be eaten. Now we get to the sin offering. The sin offering is covered in chapter 3. originally, in chapter 4, we didn't speak about the peace offering here. We're skipping ahead to the sin offering, the hatat. And let's read through this. So Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron and his sons, these are the regulations for the sin offering. The sin offering, and remember, the name we gave to the sin offering is the recompense from advertent offense. It's basically cleansing from sin or recompense for sin. What type of sin? Inadvertent sin. If you did a sin on purpose, that's a whole other category. The sacrifices don't even really deal with that per se, except in the case of deliberate financial crimes that we saw regarding the guilt offering. But this is for an inadvertent sin, and then you find out about it later. Okay, so you went to a hamburger joint. They told you that the hamburgers were made out of beef, and later on you find out that the waiter made a mistake. The hamburgers actually were 50% beef and 50% pork. Okay, you made a mistake. You found out about it later. You transgressed one of the commandments of Yahweh. You found out about it later. So what do? You bring a sin offering or a recompense from inadvertent transgression offering. Okay, the sin offering is to be slaughtered before Yahweh in the place the burnt offering is slaughtered, meaning next to the altar. It is most holy. The priest who offers of it shall eat it. It is to be eaten in the sanctuary area in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Whatever touches any of the flesh will become holy, and if any of the blood is splattered on our garment, you must wash it in the sanctuary area. The clay pot the meat is cooked in must be broken, but if it's cooked in a bronze pot, that pot is to be scoured and rinsed with water. Any male in a priest's family may eat it. It is most holy. And again, we spoke about last week. And if you look back at Leviticus chapter 4, the sin offerings are divided into two types. There's one type where either the high priest or the entire congregation inadvertently sins, and that's a more serious type that also involves sprinkling some of the blood of the sacrifice onto the curtain that separates the holy area from the holy of holy areas, and that is never eaten. That is not eaten. But the less serious type of sin offering, in which either a leader of the people or just an average lay Israelite sins, then the rest of the offering is eaten, and that's what we're seeing here. And here's for the more serious type: but any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting, and that's what I just mentioned right now. For the two more serious types, where the Kohen Gadol sins or where the entire congregation sins inadvertently, then a sin offering, a sin sacrifice is brought. The blood is collected in a bowl. The bowl is brought into the tent of meeting, and then it's sprinkled on the curtain that separates between the holy area and the holy of holies. And this is what's being spoken about here in Leviticus chapter 6, verse 30. But any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place must not be eaten. It must be burned up. And that's precisely what happens to it. The whole thing is burned up, and then the ashes are taken out of the camp and put in the ash pile outside of the camp, in that ritually clean place outside of the camp. Okay, so that's a summary of what we learned last week. Shalom, Marianana, Miknana. Any questions, any comments before we go on to Leviticus chapter 7? Anybody? Questions, comments? Okay, so let's move on. We're going to go into Leviticus chapter 7 right now. And now we're going to get laws about the guilt offering and then the peace offering, okay? And then we're going to find out some more very, very important information. And just to look ahead, that basically, the end of chapter 7, that ends the unit on the sacrifices. This gives us all the basic information that we need to know about the 5 basic types of sacrifices: the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. If you read through Leviticus 1 through 7, if you read through it 3 times in English or in whatever language you want, then you're going to get a very good idea of what the different types of offerings are. And this is going to really serve you well when you read throughout the Tanakh and you see such and such brought peace offerings, or such and such brought a sin offering, or such and such brought burnt offerings and threw them on the altar. It's really going to give more context to it, because all we know when we see something like that, right? If we haven't studied this carefully, then when we see something like that in the rest of the Tanakh, we just know some animal was somehow slaughtered and thrown on the altar somewhere. We don't really understand what the meanings of the 5 different basic types of offerings are, what they're used for, and what the rules surrounding them are. So that will end that unit, and I'll decide what we'll do next. Either we'll go back to our Parshat Shavua next week, or we may do another unit, which is the unit involving the issue of ritual, what's usually translated as ritual purity and ritual impurity. And that's a very, very important unit. That I would say is the other, most important or the most basic topic that's covered in the book of Leviticus. There are other topics that are covered, but the two most basic issues that are covered in the book of Leviticus, and the book of Leviticus, why it's called Leviticus, Levites, Leviticus, right? It's the rules of the systematized worship of Yahweh in ancient times, and in the future, perhaps in the future with some modifications, but we won't even get into that right now. But basically, if you understand the 5 different types of sacrifices and you understand the idea of ritual impurity, what's usually translated as ritual impurity and ritual purity, you have basically the 2 most important issues that are covered in the book of Leviticus. You then understand, for all intents and purposes, the book of Leviticus. Okay, and they're kind of the yin and the yang, because ritual purity is associated with the temple, and ritual impurity is associated with distancing oneself from the temple. And where the sacrifice is brought, they're only brought, and when I say the temple, it means, I just use that as a phrase to include also the tabernacle before the temple was built, but I'm just going to use the word temple. And so that covers basically the entire basis of the systematized worship of Yahweh, that you must be in a state of ritual purity to interact with the temple. And when you interact with the temple, you're essentially bringing sacrifices of one type or another. Okay. And if you're not in a state of ritual purity, then you have to distance yourself from the temple. Okay. All right. Let's move on. We're now in Leviticus chapter 7. I'm going to switch over to the Hebrew. Again, feel free to follow along in your favorite language. If you know some Hebrew, then that's great. If you don't, then an excellent way to do it is to have parallel, a parallel edition where you have Hebrew next to English. If that's a bit too challenging, if you're still working on your Hebrew, then just follow along in English or whatever your favorite language is, Spanish, Portuguese, Serbian, just to throw out some random languages. Wink, wink to my good friend who I don't think is here today, but he's usually here. Shalom, Paul. Let me add him on. Welcome, Paul, to the study. All right, so here we are. We're in Leviticus chapter 7. We're now going to be finding out more rules regarding the guilt offering. Okay, so Vizot Torat Asham Kodesh Kodeshim Hu. So this is the, and remember, we see the word, this is the Torah of the guilt offering. Let's just summarize here. What are we calling the guilt offering? We are calling it the recompense for financial transgressions offering. Okay, it's a mouthful, but that's really what it is. It involves financial transgressions, either against God inadvertently or deliberately against other human beings. So this is the Torah of the guilt offering. What does Torah mean? We said last time and for a number of weeks now, that many times before, that the word Torah in this context doesn't mean the entire Torah. It doesn't mean the 5 books of Moses. It means basically the instruction manual. That's the way you can think of it when you see the word Torah. It's relating to a set of instructions regarding a certain particular issue. In this case, it's a set of instructions regarding the guilt offering. Okay, so this is the instruction manual for the guilt offering. Kodesh Kadoshim Hu. It is holy of holies. And we've seen this phrase used a number of times. We saw the grain offering, we just saw in Leviticus 6, that the grain offering is holy of holy, just as the sin offering and the guilt offering. So now we're being told that the guilt offering is holy of holy. What does that mean? There are a lot of opinions on what that exactly means, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, or as my friend likes to say, we're not going to go down that rabbi hole right now. We're just going to keep trudging ahead. Okay, banana knees. Yeah, there you go. That would be like, bananas in different shapes or in different positions, like, cuneiform made out of bananas. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, Paul, welcome. Okay, bimakom asher yishhatu et ha'olah yishhatu et ha'asham. So in the place where you shall slaughter the burnt offering, so you shall slaughter the guilt offering. And we saw the same regulation regarding I think it was the sin offering in Leviticus chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken. Basically means near the altar. Let's bring up our map, which we refer to often. Okay, map of the tabernacle. Okay. Go away. Okay. Why is it? What the heck is going on here? No, don't bring up history. I don't want history. What the hell is going on here? What the HE double hockey sticks is going on here? I don't know why it's doing that. Map of the tabernacle. Just give me a regular Google. What's it bringing up this stupid history thing for? I don't get it. Let's try again. This doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's try again. I'm going to go to Google. What? I don't know. Chrome can be weird sometimes. So we'll just go to Google. Okay, Google. Okay, map of the tab. There we go. And okay, maybe we'll use this one. No, we'll use this one. This is the one we usually use. And we're going to go here to Flickr. And we're going to go here. And there we go. Okay, so that's the altar of sacrifice, what they call the brazen altar, because it is overlaid with bronze. It's made out of shittim wood. It's made out of acacia wood, and then it's overlaid with bronze. So they call it here the brazen or the bronze altar. It's the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so that's where the guilt offering is to be slaughtered. So its blood is to be spilled or to be tossed around the base of the altar, around the base of the altar of sacrifice. Verse 3. ואת כל חלבו יקריב ממנו את עלייה ואת החלב המכסה את הקרב. So all of its forbidden fats, we spoke about forbidden fats, halev, usually just translated as fats. See how they translate it here? It's fat, but often it's translated as the forbidden fats. Why is it called the forbidden fats? Because we human beings are not allowed to eat it ever. The only thing that's allowed to happen to these forbidden fats is they are the food for Yahweh. They are just as we learned, as I like to say, just as we learned in high school about ambrosia being the food of the gods. Well, the Torah has its food of not of the gods because we're not polytheists, we're not Trinitarians, banana makiana, and we believe only in a single God named Yahweh. And the food of the God is what's called the forbidden fats. It's the certain fats that are mentioned around or within the animal, whether they be from the herd, meaning whether they be bulls/cows, or whether they be from the flock, either sheep or goats. And in this case, it's clearly talking about sheep because it mentions the aliyah. The aliyah is the tail in the fat of the fat in the tail of the sheep. It's only relevant to the sheep. Okay, if I'm not a shepherd. At least not in the literal sense. But if you look at a sheep, or if you're familiar with sheep, you notice that unlike goats and unlike cows, they have these very fat tails, right? They have these thick tails, and they're filled with fat. The fat in those tails is called the aliyah. That's the word that's highlighted here, and it is one of the forbidden fats. Okay, it only goes to Yahweh. If it's not a sacrifice, do we eat it? Answer: according to the Karaites, traditionally, no. It is discarded. We are not allowed to eat it. This is only the food of the gods, the food of the God. Okay? It's the ambrosia of the Torah. It's only fit for consumption by our God, Yahweh, for consumption, quote unquote, by our God, Yahweh. And if he's not going to eat it, then no one else is allowed to eat it. Okay? These are his specific, special food that nobody else, no human being, no mortal is allowed to take part in. And that's why it's often translated as the forbidden fats. Okay? So all of its forbidden fats you shall offer, meaning throw on the altar of sacrifice, from it. And then it mentions these forbidden fats, et aliyah, so the tail in the fat in the tail of the sheep, et chelev hamichaset kerev, so the fat that covers the innards, the entrails. Okay, and we spoke about this before, so I'm not going to belabor it right now as to what all the details are, but we get the idea. Okay, so the kidneys, وَإِتْ الْخَيْلَ وَالشَّرْ عَلَيْهِمْ, and the fat that covers the two kidneys, أَشَرْ عَلَى الْكِسَالِيم, which are on the, you should translate as the nodes of the kidney, okay, the flanks, وَإِتْ الْيُتَرِتْ عَلى الْكَبَد, and the fatty lobe on the liver, عَلى كْلَيْوت يَسِّرِينُ. So basically, it's reiterating what these forbidden fats are, and saying that that all of this is thrown on the altar. Okay, and we saw this. So this is regarding the guilt offering. Okay, so the guilt offering. I didn't really fill it out here, but if we go back to the guilt offering for 1 second, where we originally studied the guilt offering, and that's going to be in Leviticus 5. Let me just bring it into the English. So just 1 or 2 important things to point out. Okay. So if it's a guilt offering, if it's an inadvertent financial discretion against Yahweh, against God, then you bring a ram from the flock. What is a ram? A ram is a male adult sheep. Okay. And in Leviticus chapter 6, so this is a deliberate financial indiscretion against the fellow human being. Then it's the same thing. It's a ram, so it's a male sheep. Okay, so a guilt offering is always a male sheep, unless I'm missing something here. 1 second. So first, a ram from the flock. There it is. Okay, so that's what a guilt offering is. It's always a male adult sheep, a ram. Okay, and that's why here, when we go back to Leviticus chapter 7, it speaks about the aliyah. It speaks about the fat in the tail of the sheep, because that's what a guilt offering is. A guilt offering is a male adult sheep, also known as a ram. Okay? And these are the other types of fat that are taken from the guilt offering. Let me just see one thing here. Go back to chapter 5. Just one thing. Myself, 1 second, please. Right, so it doesn't mention here. In some of the other offerings before, it does mention which fats are to be taken. But for the guilt offering, when we're originally introduced to it in Leviticus chapter 5, it doesn't mention which are the fats which are the forbidden fats. So that's why this is now mentioned in chapter 7. Okay? All right. So we're here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we're up to here, verse 6. No, we're up to here, verse 5. V'tirotam hakohen hamizbeha ishe liyahweh ashamhu. And the Kohen will take these forbidden fats, throw them onto the altar of sacrifice. Where's our altar of sacrifice? Right there. And it shall go up in smoke. The Amizbecha on the altar as a fire offering to Yahweh. It is the guilt offering, or as we're calling it, the recompense from inadvertent, or we'll just call it the recompense for financial indiscretions. Verse 6. Kol zachar b'kohanim yochlenu. So all male kohanim, all male priests may eat of it. B'makom kadosh, in a holy place. What does that mean? That means within the courtyard of the tabernacle. Ye'achel, b'makom kadosh ye'achel. It shall be eaten within that holy area, courtyard of the tabernacle, meaning within this outer. This is the outer curtain or the outer fence of the courtyard. It says here the tabernacle court. So male kohanim, meaning who are the male kohanim? Those are the ones who can actually officiate. They can perform these rituals. They can perform these sacrifices, and so they're the ones who are allowed to eat of it. And this, in my opinion, even though it doesn't mention it explicitly, this implies adult males. Okay, in other words, anyone who can officiate as a Kohen, then they can also eat of the sacrifice. Okay. B'makom kadosh ye'echel, so it shall be eaten within the courtyard of the tabernacle. Kodesh kodeshim, who it is holy of holies. Verse 7. Ki hatat ki ka'asham Torah had lehem hakohen asher yechaper bo lo yeh. Okay, so this is very interesting. So just like the sin offering, so is the guilt offering. There is one set of instructions, or there is one instruction manual for them. What are we talking about? That's clarified here. HaKohen asher yechaper bo lo yeh. The Kohen who yechaper bo, literally who is the one who is granting atonement through it. In other words, the Kohen who is performing the ritual of the sin offering, lo yeh, it becomes his. So when it says that all males, or only males among the Kohanim may eat it, then we get clarification here. This applies both to the sin offering, the chatat, and to the guilt offering. There's one set of instructions for both of them. And that set of instructions, or that instruction in this particular case, is that the priest who performs the offering to grant atonement for the person who brought the offering, it becomes his. In other words, he is the one who is allowed to eat it. That is his salary for performing, or that is recompense, that is his gift for performing the ritual of the sin offering or the guilt offering. Okay, verse 8, HaKohen HaMakriv et olat ish or ha'olah asher hikriv lakohen lo yeh. So this is all, wow, this is really amazing when you understand how the entire system works together. But let's explain this a little bit. So HaKohen HaMakriv et olat ish or ha'olah asher hikriv lakohen lo yeh. So this is now giving us a similar rule regarding the fully burnt / Holocaust offering of Leviticus chapter 1. So the Kohen who sacrifices, who offers the burnt offering, olat ish, or ha'olah asher ikriv lakohen. So the skin of that fully burnt offering, which ikriv lakohen lo yeh, okay, which he offered, lakohen lo yeh. So, all right, let me just explain what's going on here. So this is now telling us, so regarding both the sin offering and the guilt offering, we know that a portion of it is thrown onto the altar and a portion of it is eaten. In that case, the Kohen who performs the actual offering, who performs the actual sacrifice, his recompense, his gift, is the leftover portion of that offering. However, in the case of an olah is a fully burnt or a holocaust or a burnt offering. Everything is thrown onto the altar. That's why it's called a fully burnt offering. The whole thing is thrown onto the altar with the exception of the skin. If you remember, or if you look back at Leviticus chapter 1, when we spoke about the fully burnt offering, one of the things that happens in preparation of the fully burnt offering is that the animal is skinned and then it's cut into pieces, and then everything is thrown onto the altar except the skin. So the skin belongs to the Kohen who performed that fully burnt offering, who performed that Holocaust offering. Okay, that's his payment. He can't get any of the rest of the offering because everything else goes up in flames. Everything else goes up in smoke on top of the altar. That's why it's called a fully burnt offering. The only part that doesn't go up is the skin, and that belongs to the Kohen who performed the offering. Okay, and that's not a small gift either. So if you think of an entire cow or an entire bull, I think it's just a male. If you think of an entire bull, then the skin of a bull is worth a lot, right? You can make leather out of it. You can make garments out of it. You can do a lot of things. It has a lot of value. So that skin of the burnt offering is given to the Kohen who performs the offering. And if we look very quickly back in Leviticus chapter 1, excuse me. Okay, so if it's from the herd, meaning a bull or a cow, okay, you are to slaughter the young bull before Yahweh. You are to skin the burnt offering and cut it to pieces. Okay, and then the rest, okay, then Aaron's sons The priest shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat. So the head is usually discarded. For the other types of offering, the head is not thrown on the altar. Okay. You are to wash the internal organs and legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar, and also the legs and the internal organs, the entrails. These are all usually thrown away. In the other types of offerings, these are thrown away. The head, the entrails, and the legs are thrown away. They're not offered as part of the offering. But since it's a fully burnt offering, everything goes on the altar. The only thing that does not go on the altar is the skin. Okay? You were to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The skin does not go on the altar. It's the only thing that remains of the burnt offering. And we see here in Leviticus chapter 7 that the Kohen that performs that ritual, that sacrifices that burnt offering, he gets the skin as his, I don't like to say salary, as his gift. Okay? All right. Any questions? Any comments? So would the Kohen take it home to his family, or is it eaten there at the tabernacle temple? So the skin, it doesn't say that it's eaten. The skin is not eaten. Nobody wants to eat leather, okay? The skin is taken home. Love you too, Mariana Miknana. I think, Mariana Miknana, you don't have enough syllables in your name. I think you need to add a couple more syllables. It's too easy to pronounce, Mariana Miknana. Okay, so, but love you too, of course. Right? So the skin is not eaten. So yes, he takes it home and he uses it for whatever he wants to use it for. Okay? Makes a couch out of it, makes a leather jacket out of it, so he can look like the fawns when he's not officiating in the temple. Some of you may not even know that reference. I think most of the people here know that reference. Turns it into, I don't know, leather dice to put on his dashboard, whatever. Okay. מנחה אשר תאפה בתנור וכל נעשה במרחשת ועל מחבת לכהן המקריב אותה לא תהיה. So this is speaking about the grain offering, the mincha. So we had different types of grain offerings. We had grain offerings that were just handfuls of loose flour. We had a grain offering that was baked in the oven. That's what we see here. תאפה בתנור. Then we had one that is done on a griddle, and then one that's done in they usually translate this as a pan or a frying pan or something like that. So different types of grain offerings. Okay, so it then becomes the property. So the part of, remember, for grain offering, a memorial portion is thrown on top of the altar. If it's loose flour, then a handful is taken and thrown on the altar. If it's a loaf of unleavened bread, whether it's baked in the oven, fried on a griddle, or fried in a deeper pan, then a piece is broken off and thrown on the altar. But the rest belongs to the Kohen who offered it, who performed that ritual. Okay, and that's what we see here in verse 9. Verse 10. V'chol mincha blula b'shemen וחרבה לכל בני אהרון תהיה איש כאחיו. Okay, so what do we have here? So v'chol mincha blula b'shemen וחרבה לכל בני אהרון תהיה איש כאחיו. So this is saying, okay. Kol mincha blula b'shemen. So any grain offering that is mixed with oil. We saw that in chapter 2, that some are mixed with oil. Wa chareva means dry. Okay, meaning not mixed with oil. So whether the grain offering is mixed with oil or not mixed with oil, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, it belongs to all of the children of Aaron. Tiyeh ish ke'achav. Each person like his brother, which means that in such a situation, the offering is split among all of the Kohanim. It doesn't belong to a specific Kohen. Okay? Let me just parse this in my mind for a second. Ish ke'echao. One second. I want to get a commentary on this. Let's look at Robert Alter for that. Okay. if he even comments on it. Sometimes he doesn't comment on these more technical parts. Let's see. So Robert Alter. And this is Leviticus chapter 7. $9:05. 1 second, everyone, please. So just bring up the actual text here. And then I'll bring up the commentary over here. So this is page 905. So this is Leviticus 7:10. And every grain offering mixed with oil or dry shall be for all the sons of Aaron, each man of him alike. So Robert Alter translates it this way. He doesn't have any comment on it. And every grain offering that is baked in an oven and everything made in a pan and on a griddle is the priest who brings it forward. His shall it shall be. And every grain offering mixed with oil or dry shall be for all the sons of Aaron, each man of them alike. Okay. So that is a little bit unclear to me. Let's look at, and I've got to plug it in a second. Let's look at, who should we look at? We'll look at some of our commentaries here. So this is Leviticus 7:10. I'm going to go to 7:10. Okay. Meat offering or dry. 1 second here. Okay, so let's read this. So in every meat offering and dry, better, but every meat offering or dry, the only exception to the foregoing rule is the raw flour offering, that is the voluntary offering of flour which was mingled with oil or the poor man's sin. One second here. So the skin of the burnt offering, all the flesh and the fat of the burnt offering is in the skin is okay. Drive that oil drink offering, one as much as the other. Every priest shall have equal right to this. Administration with this. No reason. Wait, just 1 second, please, everyone. Duration of the phrase. Equally divided among and every meat offering mingled with oil. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at this a bit more myself. I don't want to get bogged down here. Something doesn't make sense to me, but we're just gonna move on. Okay, I'll just make a note for myself and I'll look at it offline. All right, let's move on now to Leviticus chapter 7, verse 11. So that concludes more rules regarding the guilt offering. In Leviticus chapter 6, we had supplementary rules for the burnt offering and the grain offering and the sin offering. Now we have, in 7, we have for the guilt offering, and now that last type of offering that was covered originally in Leviticus chapter 3 is the peace offering. And now we're going to get similar rules for the peace offering. And remember, the peace offering, unlike the sin offering and the guilt offering, is a positive offering. It's when good things happen that you bring a peace offering. When do you bring a sin offering or a guilt offering? Well, as the names imply, when you sin or when you incur some kind of guilt, the details of which we said earlier. Okay? All right, let me close this out. Let me leave this open. We'll leave that open. And we are now back in Leviticus 7. So now we're going to get to this nice offering, this positive offering, this peace offering, which is like, hey, God, I'm really happy with what happened, or I want to say thank you, or I just want to check in and say hi, or something really, I'm celebrating something, and so I want to bring all these communion offerings, as we're calling them. Okay, so that's the peace offering. So let's the laws regarding it. And we are in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 11. And I've got to take a break pretty soon and plug in, but we'll go for a couple of verses. So Leviticus chapter 7, verse 11. Zot Torah zevach hashlamim asher yakriv liyahweh. This is the set of instructions regarding the peace offering, or the peace slaughter. Asher yakriv liyahweh, which a person shall offer to Yahweh. Verse 12. Im al todah yakrivenu wa ikriv al zevach hatodah halot masot blulot bashemen urekike masot mishuchim bashamen wa solet murbechet halot blulot bashamen. So if this is al todah, so what is al todah? Let's get a good translation for this. Should we do Everett Fox? Well, we have Robert Alter open, so let's do Robert Alter. Okay, so if in Thanksgiving he translates it. Okay, so there are different contexts in which you may bring a peace offering, and one of them is thanks, as we mentioned just before. You want to say thanks to Yahweh for something good that he did for you or for all of the people. You bring a peace offering, and it's in return for, it's a way of saying thank you to Yahweh. Todah, for anyone who lives in Israel or has even visited Israel, how do you say thank you? Todah. How do you say thank you very much? Todah rabbah. So it's the same thing. Okay, it's a thanksgiving, they usually translate it as, but it's a way of saying thank you, Todah, to Yahweh. So just as in America we have Thanksgiving once a year, well, this is the Israelite way of saying thank you. You bring a peace offering that is a way of expressing thanks. Okay, and then we have laws regarding it. We kriv al zevach hatodah. So with this Thanksgiving offering, and remember, it's not a separate offering. The Thanksgiving offering is not a separate offering. It's a peace offering, but it's a peace offering to say thank you. Okay, so then we have instructions on how it's brought. So halot matzot blulot bashemen. So it's loaves of unleavened bread, and of course it makes sense because this is part of the of an offering that's going up onto the altar. So it's going to be unleavened. So loaves of unleavened bread mixed with oil. So you take the flour, you mix it with oil, you add some water, you do not add any leavening agent, and you bake it, and you get basically kind of I guess an oily flatbread, maybe like not quite a pizza dough because pizza dough has yeast in it, but I don't know what the equivalent would be. A very thick or very dense pizza dough that doesn't have any leavening agent. Urekike matzot mishuchim bashamen, or crackers, basically unleavened crackers. So you make matzah, you break it into crackers. If you've ever made matzah at home, then one of the ways to make matzah is to do exactly that. You take flour, you add water to it, optionally add some spices to it, not too many because it's a Tanach-only. It's also called the bread of affliction. You bake it in the oven, you roll it out very thin, you bake it in the oven, or you can cut it before. I usually just make indentations before, so that's easy to break afterwards. But you break it into you bake it, and it comes out as a cracker, and then you can break off little crackers from that one big cracker. So this is going to be unleavened crackers, mishuchim bashamen, and they are going to be mixed with oil. So then you take those crackers, you pour oil on top of them, and you toss them. Okay, and now you're going to have, I'm sorry, not mishuchim. Mishuchim is going to be anointed, literally, with oil poured over it. It's the same word as Mashiach or Messiah. Mishuchim means anointed with oil. So again, you take those dry crackers, those dry unleavened crackers, and then you pour oil on top of it. Okay, and that is rikike matzot mishuchim bashamen. Okay, unleavened bread crackers, unleavened bread broken into crackers, and then olive oil poured over it. Usolet murbechet halot blulot bashamen. So Let's get a translation on this one. So this is 12. Let's get a translation on the whole thing. He shall bring forward with the Thanksgiving sacrifice flat cakes, that's unleavened bread, basically flat bread mixed in oil, and flat cake wafers, that's what we said are the crackers coated with oil, and cakes of semolina soaked through mixed in oil. Okay, so cakes of semolina soaked through mixed in oil. Let's look at it again in the Hebrew. Okay, the solet mudbechet chalot blulot ba shaman. Okay, so mudbechet is usually translated as mixed well with oil or something like that. So basically, you take solet is is flour. Okay, so you take flour, you mix oil into it, and then you bake it into unleavened bread, and then it's blulot bashaman. So I think this is referring to the same thing. Again, it's just very well mixed with oil. I'd have to put an asterisk next to that and get some commentary, and Robert Alter doesn't have some commentary. So I'm not sure exactly what the nature of that is. I'd have to look into it a little bit more, but it's basically flour mixed with the oil and then baked into unleavened bread. Okay, verse 13. Okay, al halot lechem chametz yakriv kormano al zevach todah shilamau. So now we have halot lechem chametz. So now it's going to be brought along with leavened bread. Okay, so why leavened bread? Because that leavened bread is not thrown on the altar, so it's allowed to be leavened. So here, all of this is unleavened. Okay, and here we have leavened bread that's also to be made, but it's not going to be thrown on the altar. As long as it's not thrown on the altar, it's allowed to be leavened. Okay, yakriv kormano al zevach todah shilamau, for the sacrifice of thanksgiving as a peace offering, as his peace offering. Okay. All right. Verse 14. V'ikriv mimenu echad mikol korban truma liyahweh lekohen hazorek dam shlamim lo yeh. Okay. V'ikriv mimenu echad mikol korban truma liyahweh lekohen hazorek et dam shlamim lo yeh. Let's again get a little translation here. Verse 14, and he shall bring forward from it one kind of each offering, a levy to Yahweh, for the priest casting the blood of the communion sacrifice, his it shall be. So what this is saying is, let me just parse it again in Hebrew. So this is now so now we're talking about the peace offering. We're talking about saying thank you through a peace offering, a todah. Okay, it's not a separate type of offering. It's a context in which we bring a peace offering. And then when he brings this peace offering, he's also supposed to bring a bunch of unleavened bread. We saw here. Okay. So we have the unleavened flour mixed with oil and then baked into a loaf. We have the unleavened crackers that are then have oil poured over them, and then we have the flour mixed well with oil and then baked into a loaf. And then we have, so those are the three types of unleavened offerings that are brought with the peace offering. And then we have a loaf of leavened bread. Okay, so there are four different types. So the person who brings this peace offering as a way of saying thanks has to bring these other four types of grain offerings that we just mentioned. Okay, truma liyahweh. This is a gift. A truma. You guys, no, you don't know that word. Okay, it's a gift, or let's get a translation here from Robert Alter, verse 14. So he translates it as a levy. Okay, truma is like a donation, a gift, a levy, a tax. So this is the gift. This is what you bring to Yahweh from each of these four types of grain offerings that goes along with that peace offering in the context of saying thanks. Okay, and then la kohen hazorek et dam shlamim lo yeh. And so now we ask to who do these four types of grain offerings that are brought with the peace offering, who do they belong? LaKohen zorek dam hashlamim lo yeh. So to the Kohen, to the priest who splatters the blood of the peace offering, that means the Kohen who's officiating over that peace offering, right? Remember, the peace offering is an animal. Okay, lo yeh, he also gets, it shall be his, meaning that the priest who officiates over the peace offering, he also gets that all of these grain offerings become his possession. And there's no mention anywhere of these grain offerings being tossed onto the fire, and that's why one of them is allowed to be leavened. The other three are unleavened, and one is leavened. So there are 4 grain offerings. I have to plug in right now. There are 4 grain offerings that are brought with the peace offering, with the peace offering, in the context of saying thanks. And the Kohen that performs that peace offering, who actually slaughters the animal, he takes possession of those 4 grain offerings. Those become his gifts. Okay, so that sums that up. Okay, let me just plug in for a second. I'm just going to put it on mute. I'm just going to put it on mute, and I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, everyone, we're back. So we're getting a little bit technical here, but that's okay. No big deal. Let's move on. We are in verse 15. And really what I want to do is I want to turn all of the stuff we've learned in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7, and there are a couple of verses that I need to go back and I need to clarify for myself. That's okay, no big deal. And I want to turn it into a big chart. And if I do, and if I have the time to do that, I'll let you guys all know. And you can look at the chart, which summarizes all of the rules of the various offerings. Okay, we're now in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 15. So, ubasar zevach todah shlamau. So, regarding the meat of the slaughter of the peace offering in the context of saying thank you, b'yom korbano, on the day that it is brought forward, that is sacrificed, it is to be eaten. Lo yaniach mimenu ad boker. You are not allowed to leave it until the following morning. So, very similar to, for instance, the Passover sacrifice. Okay, we saw with the Passover sacrifice in Exodus chapter 12 that it is not allowed to be left until the morning, but if any is left into the morning, then it is to be burnt. Okay, in other words, you do not leave a sacrifice that's to be brought to Yahweh, you do not leave it to become disgusting and rancid. If you leave meat, even after it's been cooked, just sitting around overnight, by the time the next morning rolls around and the sun is starting to rise and it's getting warmer, if you leave it any longer, it's going to be disgusting. Remember, in those days, they didn't have refrigerators. Okay, you couldn't stick your hamburger in the refrigerator. They didn't have freezers. Yes, you could salt things and stuff like that, but the sacrifices are not meant to be preserved. They're meant to be eaten, and by the next morning, whatever hasn't been eaten, well, in this case, it has to be all eaten by the next morning. But in the case of the Passover sacrifice, we saw that if it's not eaten, then the next morning it's burnt. Okay, verse 16. So now we have we're still in the context, or we're still speaking about peace offerings. And again, that's just the colloquial translation. What we're calling them is communion offerings. Okay, basically like coming together with Yahweh, but usually in a positive sense. And I'll explain what these other types are right now. So im neder or nidava. Okay. So we saw so far that the first context for the peace offering is what's called a todah. Todah is thank you, Yahweh. You did something great for me. You did something great for the nation, and I would like to thank you by bringing an offering. It's a positive offering. Remember, the peace offering is generally associated with something positive. Okay, so the next type we have is a neder. Okay, a neder is usually translated as an oath or a promise. Let's see how they translate it here. A vow. See how Robert Alter translates it as 16. Assuming he's going to use exactly the same word. A votive or free will offering. So votive, I don't even know what votive means. Let's look it up. Robert Alter does that to me frequently. I mean, I think I know what it means, but I just want to clarify. Offered or consecrated in fulfillment of a vow, right? So that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what we're talking about. And neder is a vow. And let me explain what I mean, okay? You are caught in a rainstorm. No, let me give a better example because I know there have been people caught in some horrible storms lately. Let's say you are, I don't know, you have a lawsuit against you, and let me just make sure everything's working here. Guys, can you see me before we go on? Is the sound and everything okay? Can I just get a sound check, please, from somebody? Somebody. Okay, good. All right. So there's a lawsuit against you for $1 million, and you say to God, God, I vow, okay, I swear that if you get me out of this mess, then I will bring you a sacrifice of, I guess it's going to be a peace offering. So peace offerings can be what? Let's look again. So it can either be a bull/cow or it can be a sheep/goat. So if you get me out of this mess, I swear, okay, I promise that I will bring 3 sheep as a way of thanking you for getting me out of this mess. Okay, that's a neder. Hold on 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you get me out of this lawsuit, if you get me out of this mess, then I will bring 3 sheep as a vow. I swear, I take a vow that I will bring 3 sheep as a way of saying thank you for getting me out of this mess, or as a way of acknowledging the fact that you came to my aid and got me out of this mess. And then a couple of weeks later, the judge rules, no, the loss is is thrown out of court. You don't owe the $1 million, and now it's time for you to pay your vows. It's time for you to pay your neder, and now you have to take 3 sheep and you have to bring it to the the temple as a peace offering in the context. And again, I'm not saying sometimes this is translated as a vow offering or as a fulfillment of a vow offering. It's not a separate type of offering. It's a peace offering, but it's in the context of fulfilling a vow. It's in the context of fulfilling a vow. Okay, 1 second, please. I just want to get some water. I'll be right back. Okay, let's go on. So that's a neder. And then a nidava, usually called a free will offering, in modern Hebrew, nadiv means generous. Okay, nidava is like something offered out of generosity. So it's just you, and here they translate, or Robert Alter translates it as a free will offering. Okay, so you're not doing it for anything in particular. You're just basically saying, like, I'm feeling good about life, and I just feel like giving something back to Yahweh. Things are going well for me in life, and I would like to give something back to Yahweh. It's not a way of saying thank you. It's not a todah. It's not in the context of a todah. It's not a way of saying thank you for a specific incident or a specific thing that Yahweh has done for you. It's not a way of fulfilling a vow. Yahweh, if you get me out of this lawsuit, this $1 million lawsuit, then I will bring you 3 sheep. It's just like, hey, things are going good, and you know what? I know that I want to remember Yahweh. I know that He's behind this all one way or another, and I want to just say hi, check in, bring Him a little gift. It's basically like a gift that you decide out of the generosity of your heart, or out of the feeling that you wanna check in with Yahweh and you want to give Him a gift. That's excuse me. That's what a nidava is. Okay. Again, Robert Alter translates it as a free will offering. Okay. So that's the second and third context that we've run into so far. So we've run into 3 contexts for this peace offering. So it is a peace offering, but the first context is a todah. Thank you, Yahweh. We went out to battle against the Midianites. You saved us, and now we would like to thank you for saving us from the hand of the Midianites, and we're bringing you thanksgiving, or bringing you peace offerings in the context of thanksgiving. Or, hey, this guy sued me for $1 million. The judge threw out the case, or this guy suing you for $1 million. Yahweh, I don't want to use the name. God, I swear that if you get me out of this mess, then I will bring you 3 sheep and 5 goats. I vow to you 3 sheep and 5 goats. If you get me out of this mess, the case is dismissed, and now you pay up your vow. You bring your 3 sheep and your 5 goats. That's a neder. And then a nidava. Wow, things are really going well in my life, and I really love my life, and I know Yahweh is great. God is great, and I really want to just like check in, say hi, and thank Him for everything. And that's a nidava, free will offering. Okay, so what are the rules regarding the peace offering in these 2 contexts? Okay, on the day that he brings forth his offering, his slaughtered animal, yachel, it shall be eaten. Umimacharat anotar mimenu yeachel, and the following day, anything that's left over from it also may be eaten. Okay, so in this case, it's less stringent. You can eat it the following day. Wahanotar mibsar zavach b'yom hashlishi ba'esh yisaref. But anything left over on the third day shall be burnt in fire. Okay, so in the case of a todah, in the case of a thank you, where was it? Right. In the case of a thank you, then because I guess this is in recompense for a specific incident, a specific salvation that Yahweh did for a person or a group or the entire nation, then anything that's left over into the morning or nothing shall be left over to the morning. It all is eaten. But this in the context of fulfilling a vow or just a free will offering, then it can be eaten on the day that it's sacrificed. It can be eaten, which is day one. It can be eaten the next day, mimacharat. Okay, and anything that lasts until the third day, on the third day, then it is to be burnt in fire. So basically, this also gives us a little bit of insight into the way that time is counted in the Torah. The day on which it's sacrificed is considered day one. The next day is considered, excuse me for 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Just have some distractions here, and I hope it's soft now. Okay, so in the case of a vow, payment of a vow, or a free will offering, okay, then on day one, meaning on the day that it's actually sacrificed, it can be eaten. On the following day, it can be eaten. But once the third day comes, once the morning of the third day comes, anything left over is then burnt in fire. Okay? All right, let's go on. We're now in verse 18. Let's go up to here. V'im he'achol ye'achel mibsar zevach shelomao b'yom hashlishi lo ye'raseh. So if it is in any way eaten, or if any way the flesh of this peace offering, again speaking about in the context of the fulfillment of a vow or the free will offering, if any of it in any way is eaten on the third day, lo yiratzeh, it will not be desired. It's not considered desirable. It's not wanted by Yahweh. Hamakrivoto lo yechashev. Lo yechashev lo. And he who sacrifices it, meaning the person who brought it as a sacrifice, lo yechashev. He will not be, how can we translate this? He will not be accounted for. In other words, it will not considered as if it was, it will not be, I'm trying to think of a good translation here. Lo yechashev. It will not be thought of as acceptable, or it will not be accepted. Let's see how they translate it here. It will not be imputed. I don't like that translation. Let's look at Robert Alter for a second. Verse 18. Okay, it will not be acceptable. Yeah, that's kind of a decent translation. It basically means, maybe acceptable is a good translation. I'm trying to think of a better word. Lo yachashev. It will not be accounted for him as acceptable, maybe would be a good translation. Okay, it's a bit difficult to translate into the English, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, lo yachashev lo pigul yi'eh. it shall be considered what is a pigul? A pigul is translated here as an abomination. And anyone or the person who eats it shall bear his sin. So basically what we're saying here is that if you eat it on the third day, it basically cancels out the effect that you wanted to create by fulfilling that vow, or by bringing that free will offering. Instead of it being accepted by Yahweh, it's rejected by Yahweh. The person who brought it doesn't fulfill his goal of attempting to fulfill a vow, or attempting to bring a free will offering. You know what? I have a good solution here. I'm gonna just move into another room because there's just way too many distractions here. Guys, I'm gonna put on music for about 5 minutes, and let me just move somewhere else because there's just way too many distractions here. Sorry about this. One second.
הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל משקותיו, הים ראה רעב וינוס, הירדן ייסוב לאחור, ההרים רקדו חלים, גבעות כבני צאן, אצל ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מעמלואס. מה לך הים כי תנוס, הירדן תיסוב לאחור, ההרים תרקדו חלים, גבעות כבני צאן. מלפני אדון לכולי ארץ, מלפני אלוה יעקב, החופי הצור, הגמלי, חלמיש, למעיינו מעלים. ברוך אתה השם אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר גאלנו וגאל את אבותינו ממצרים, והגיענו הלילה הזה לאכול בו מצה ומרור. כן השם אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, הגיענו למועדים ולרגלים אחרים הבאים לקראתנו לשלום. שמחים בבניין עירך וששים בעבודתך, ונאכל שם מן הזבחים ומן הפסחים אשר יגיע דמם על קיר מזבחך לרצון. ונודה לך שיר חדש על גאולתנו ועל פדות נפשנו, ברוך אתה השם גאל ישראל. הנני מוכן ומזומן לקיים מצוות כוס שנייה של 4 כוסות, לשם ייחוד קודשא בריחו ושכינתה, על ידי ההוא תמיר ונעלם בשם כל ישראל. ברוך אתה השם אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. רחצה, ייטול ידיו בברכה לצורך סעודה, ואחר הנטילה טרם הניגוב יברך. ברוך אתה השם אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על נטילת ידיים. מוציא, תכף לנטילה יברך המוציא. ייקח את 3 המצות הנמצאות בקערה, ויברך המוציא ולא יטעם, כמנהגו כל השנה. לא יטעם טרם שיברך על אכילת מצה. ברוך אתה השם אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. מצה, לאחר הברכה יניח התחתונה מידו, וישארו בידו 2 מצות, אחת שלמה ואחת פרוסה. לאחר מכן יטבול אותן במלח ויברך. ברוך אתה השם, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על אכילת מצה. נותן לעצמו ונותן לכל אחד מן המסובים כזית מן המצה העליונה וכזית מן האמצעית. מרור. ייקח כזית מרור ויטבלנו בחרוסת. זכר למרירות של עבודת הטיט. וינער מעליו החרוסת כדי שלא יתבטל טעם מרירות ויברך. ברוך אתה השם, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על אכילת מרור. כורך. כורך מרור עם מצה מהמצה השלישית שבקערה, ועם חרוסת, ויאכלם, ובטרם שיאכל יאמר.
Okay, I'm back. I think it's going to be a lot more quiet in here. It was an absolute madhouse over there. I had animals running around, people. Okay, let's see here. Let's get rid of this. This goes back. Okay. This goes like so. And this. Window. Boom. Okay. All right. Hopefully we'll be able to concentrate a little bit more here. All right. So where are we? So right. So we're in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 18. And basically what we're saying here, I mean, I want to translate this again because it's really expressed or it's really presented in a very expressive way. So im he achol ye'achel mipsad zevach shlama b'yom shlishi. So if any way, any flesh from the peace offering, the peace sacrifice, should be eaten on the third day, lo yiratzeh, it will not be considered desirable. It will not be wanted by Yahweh. Hamakrivoto lo yachashev, and the person who brings it as a sacrifice will not get what he wanted. It won't be thought. It won't be accounted for him as a positive thing. If he brought it as a vow, it will not be considered fulfillment of his vow. If he brought it as a nidaba, as a free will offering, it will not be accepted as a free will offering. Okay, you won't get any credit for it. Okay, lo yachashev lo. Pigul hu, it is an abomination. And let's see how Robert Alter translates that one, just to get a different translation, or even Everett Fox. Oh, we'll go with Robert Alter. It is desecrated meat, is the way that Robert Alter translates it. Let's look at Everett Fox for a second. And again, this is Leviticus 7. Leviticus 7:18. So this is how Everett Fox renders it, and he also has a very nice translation. So now should there be eaten? Yes, eaten any of the flesh of his slaughter offering of shalom, that's the peace offering, on the third day. It is not acceptable for him that brings it near. It will not be reckoned to him. Tainted meat it shall be considered, and the person who eats of it, his iniquity he shall bear. So that's an excellent translation, and let's just leave it with that translation, all right? Because I think that expresses everything. So basically, we saw in the case of a Thanksgiving, todah. Remember, todah means thanks. Even in modern Hebrew, if you want to say thank you very much, you'll hear 80 zillion times a day. Well, not that many because Israelis are not polite, but if they were polite, you'd hear it a lot more often. But they do, they do say todah rabah. Thank you very much. Todah rabah. You'll hear that all day long when you're in Israel. Okay, so if it's a peace offering in the context of saying thank you, then it must be eaten on the day that it's brought. It cannot be left over until the next morning. If it's not a thank you context, but and I'm not calling it a thank you offering. Some translations will consider it a separate offering, but it's not. It's a peace offering, but it's in the context of saying thank you. So, but if it's a peace offering in the context of fulfilling a vow, or a peace offering in the context of saying, hey, I'm just in the mood to give you something. You know, life is going well, and I really thank you for everything. I won't say thank you because you may get confused with the thank you offering. I just want to give you something out of the free will of my heart. Then it can be eaten on the day that it's brought. It can be eaten the next day, but if it's left over when the sun shines on that third day, then it has to be burnt in the fire. If anyone eats it on that third day, then all the effects of it, all the positive effects of it are canceled out, and it's considered an abomination to eat it on the third day. And the person who does so is going to have to reckon with Yahweh. He shall bear his sin. Okay? So the basic idea here is that any offering is not to be left sitting around until it becomes disgusting, until it becomes rancid, full of maggots, or just rotting or smelling a little bit off. That is not acceptable. That is not proper for an offering to the Lord, an offering to Yahweh. Okay? So we'll pick it up here in verse 19. Okay? Any questions, any comments so far? Shabbat Shalom, Desiree. Shabbat Shalom, Paul, if I didn't say already. Any questions, any comments so far? If not, we'll move on. Verse 19. So any of the flesh from the Thanksgiving offering, that comes into contact with anything that is ritually impure. So again, the other main, I would say, the other main instruction booklet, set of laws in Leviticus is this idea of ritual purity and ritual impurity. if we do decide to go into that unit of study, then we'll talk about it a lot more. But basically, anything that's tameh, anything that has become ritually impure, that's become spiritually unclean. It's a horrible translation, but that's the best I'll do for right now until we get into it further. Anything that is ritually impure cannot come in contact with anything that is holy, anything that is dedicated to Yahweh. So if something that is ritually impure comes in contact with the meat of the Thanksgiving offering, then lo yechel, then it no longer is allowed to be eaten, but eish saref, it should be burned in fire. Okay, it still was holy because it's an offering to Yahweh, but now it's not to be eaten. It's you immediately go to the stage where it's burnt in fire. That's it. That's the end of its allowable consumption, of its allowable usefulness. Okay, habasar habasar kol tahor. Okay, and regarding its flesh, anyone who is in a state of ritual purity may eat of its meat. Okay, and let's see if we can get a little commentary on that. So that's verse 19. So, and the flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. In fire it shall be burned. And other flesh, whoever is clean may eat the flesh. Okay. Let's see here. Well, let's finish the end of this unit, and then maybe we'll go back and read some of the comments from Robert Alter. Verse 20. והנפש אשר תאכל בשר מזבח השלמים אשר ליהוה ותאומתו עליו ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. So any person who eats from among the meat, meets the flesh from the peace offering, which is dedicated to Yahweh, which belongs to Yahweh, Witumato allow, and he is in a state of ritual impurity, then that person is cut off from his people. This is Karaite, this is excision, this is perhaps the worst, or this is a punishment that's reserved for some of the worst transgressions in the Torah, such as, for instance, failing to bring the Passover offering. Okay, so if you're in a state of ritual impurity and you eat the flesh of that sacrifice, then you are cut off from your people. That could mean a couple of different things, which we won't get into right now. There are a couple of different opinions as to what it means. Okay, now this is freezing up. Here we go with that. There goes Chrome freezing up. I think I'm gonna have to restart the computer. There's been a lot of distractions today, but what can you do? Let me see if it unfreezes on its own in a couple of seconds. If not, I'm gonna have to restart the computer, and I'll come back to you guys in about 5 minutes. All right, Chrome, you can do it. Nope, you can't do it. It's frozen. Let me wait till I see the beach ball just to confirm, but I think we're frozen here. Yeah, we're frozen. All right. I'll be back in 5 minutes, guys. I have to restart the computer. No other way around it. Okay. Okay, we're back. Let me just do a quick sound check. Can you guys hear me? Sound check. Guys, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. All right. Let me share the screen and we'll continue. Boy, this has been a lot of distractions today, but that's okay. We'll get through it. All right. Okay, so we are in, right. We're talking about anyone who eats it in a state of ritual impurity, then that person is cut off from his people. Excision. He's excised from the people of Israel. Okay, whatever that means. And we won't go into the details of that right now. There are different opinions on what that means. Verse 21. ונפש כי תיגע בכל טמא בטומאת אדם או בבהמה טמאה או בכל שקץ טמא ואכל מבשר זבח השלמים אשר ליהוה ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. And a person who makes contact with anything that is ritually impure, בטומאת אדם or בהמה Tme'ah, with any ritual impurity that comes from a human being, which if we study ritual impurity, we will go into this, or bivhema tme'ah, or with an unclean animal, a ritually unclean animal, or b'chol sheketz tameh, or with any disgusting thing that is ritually impure. So basically, if you put yourself into a state of ritual impurity, is what it's saying, and then eats from the flesh of the peace sacrifice, the peace slaughter, which belongs to Yahweh, and that's important because when it belongs to Yahweh, it is holy, so it cannot come in contact with anything that's impure. Then that person shall be cut off from his people. In other words, again, excision. Okay. So basically, what we're saying in these verses here. One second. Okay, so basically it's reiterating. Okay, so in these verses, basically what this is saying is that you must be in a state of ritual purity in order to eat from the zevach shlamim, from the peace offerings, and anyone who's not in a state of ritual purity and eats from the peace offerings, then that person is cut off. Excision. This also brings up another important point, which is who gets to eat the peace offerings, and it's not just the Kohanim this time. It's anyone can eat it, and we saw this. Where was it? I can't see where it is right now, but we saw it earlier. דם השלמים לא יהיה. Second, okay. I don't remember where it is right now, but when we maybe go to some, when we go to some commentary, then maybe we'll see it again. Okay, so those are the laws for the peace offering. So what's very interesting about the peace offering is that it does not have to be eaten by the. It's doing this again. Okay, it's back. It does not have to be eaten by the Kohen. It can be eaten by a regular person, but that person must be in a state of ritual purity. That's why this is mentioned here. The Kohanim are already expected to be in a state of ritual purity because they're the ones who are performing the sacrifices. But here, why does the Torah go into these couple of verses where it emphasizes that the person who eats of the peace offering must be in a state of ritual purity? Because it doesn't have to be eaten by a Kohen. It can be eaten by any Israelite. Okay? All right. Let's see if we can get some commentary here. Video is back. Okay. Everything working? I hope so. Let's see if we can get some commentary here. And to do that, we'll go to Robert Alter, our good old standby. I can't remember what page it was. Let's see if we can find it. So in Leviticus chapter 7, 905. All right, so let's go down to the area with the peace offering. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of comments here because he doesn't really comment too often on the technical stuff. So there are actually no comments about all of these verses. His first comment is in verse 18. So desecrated meat. The Hebrew pigul is a rare term of uncertain etymology. That's what we saw here. This is in Leviticus 7:18. Let me just point it out. It's this word right here, pigul. So translated often as abomination. Robert Alter translates it as desecrated meat, and then he comments that the word pigul, the Hebrew pigul, is a rare term of uncertain etymology and without evident cognates in other Semitic languages. Most interpreters, ancient and modern, assume it means something like abomination or abhorrent thing. But Milgram, who he said is one of the leading experts, was one of the leading experts on the book of Leviticus, carefully scrutinizing the other biblical occurrences with an eye to the present context, pervasively argues that the word has a technical sense of desecrated meat. Okay, and other flesh. So yeah, this is a bit strange. Also in Leviticus 7:19. So this is just a kind of a strange construct. So he's referring to this. So literally it says basar kol tahor yochal basar. And regarding the flesh, I would translate it as anyone who is in a state of ritual purity shall eat the flesh. See how Robert Alter translates that one. That's verse 19. But it's a bit awkward in the Hebrew, and so he's going to comment on it. Okay. So he says, and the flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. In fire it shall be burned. Okay, and let's see his comment here. And other flesh, wait a second. I'm not sure. Oh, and other flesh, oh, this is where it is. And other flesh, whoever is clean may eat the flesh. Okay, so his comment there is the Hebrew says somewhat obscurely only the flesh. The context compels one to infer that what is meant is the flesh of the communion sacrifice that has not been defiled by contact with something unclean. Okay. Then we go to verse 21, and he's speaking about this word right here, shekets. This is usually translated again as kind of an abomination or a disgusting thing. So anyone who has any contact with any disgusting thing, meaning that causes them to be ritually impure, sheketz tameh, so a disgusting thing that causes a state of ritual impurity or that is in a state of ritual impurity, and then goes ahead and eats of the peace offering, then that person is cut off from his people, cut off from the people of Israel. And Robert Alter says there, the Hebrew noun is sheketz, which usually means abomination. Some manuscript versions read sheretz, creeping thing, which would be the more expected term here, right? And the reason it would be the more expected term is because we have different types of creatures. So here we have man, human beings. Here we have domesticated animals. So an sheretz is basically swarming things that run around in swarms. So it would make more sense, and Robert Alter correctly points that out, but we're just going to move ahead here, okay? And then that's it. That's what we got up to, okay? So just to sum up here, regarding the peace offering, these are additional laws regarding the peace offering. And maybe the most interesting thing to be gleaned from this is that unlike the other offerings, the peace offering can be eaten by regular people, does not have to be eaten by a Kohen, but that regular person that eats it must be in a state of ritual purity, okay? So before we go on, and we'll probably just go to the end of chapter 7, and then I'm going to stop here. Here it gets a little bit less technical, but any questions, any comments? So if not, we're going to move on. All right, verse 22. Why? Yidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moses to say, Daber el bnei Israel lemor, speak to the children of Israel to say, Kol helev, shor, wa kesev, wa ez, lo tochelu. Okay, so this is really important, okay? Any forbidden fat, well, I won't call it in this case forbidden fat, really what it means is fat. So those fats that are removed from the animals and thrown onto the altar, that special food of God, the food of our God, okay? Chalev shor, so the fat of a bull, an ox, a sheep, or a goat, lo tochelu, you shall not eat. So those forbidden fats are not to be eaten by human beings. That is the ambrosia of the Torah. It's the food of, not the gods, but the food of our God, Yahweh. וחלב נבלה וחלב טרפה יעשה לכל מלאכה ואוכל לא תאכלוהו. Okay, so if it's the forbidden fats of an animal that died by itself or that was preyed upon, ripped to shreds by a predator, okay, יעשה לכל מלאכה, it may be used for any type of tasks. So I don't know, make candles out of it, make soap out of it, or something like that. Lo tochelu, but you shall definitely not eat it. Okay. So what is there to point out so far? We already have a general commandment here that the forbidden fats, or basically the fats of these animals are forbidden. Okay, we're not to eat them. And now we have an additional commandment here that if it's an animal that on its own or that was preyed upon and ripped to shreds by a predator, then that fat can be used to make things with it, but it should not be eaten. Okay? Verse 25. Kikol ochel chelev mina behema asher yakriv mimena ishe liyahweh unichrata hanefesh haochelet me'ameha. Because anyone who eats the fats from an animal, asher yakriv mimena ishe, that can be used to bring a fire offering Yahweh to Yahweh, that person shall be cut off from his people. So this is saying in no uncertain terms, that you are not allowed to eat the forbidden fats, what are called the forbidden fats of an animal. The reason they're called the forbidden fats is because we are not allowed to eat them. Okay. Now this is clearly talking about not only animals that are brought as sacrifices, because you would never bring a nivela, an animal that died on its own, or a trefa, an animal that was ripped apart by a predator. You would never bring that as a sacrifice. So this just means any animals. If you go to the butcher, then and just get a regular meat, then you're not allowed to eat the forbidden fats. The forbidden fats are called forbidden because they belong only to Yahweh. They're not to be consumed by human beings. They're not to be consumed by the children of Israel, at the very least. Okay. Now this becomes a problem. Let's talk in a practical sense. If you go to the butcher, now I'm not a butcher. Actually, I'm a vegetarian. Basically, I will eat fish. I will eat fish, and once in a blue moon, I'll eat chicken. But I don't eat any red meat, so I'm definitely not a butcher. And I don't know if you go like to the supermarket and buy ground beef, if they mix in also these forbidden fats. But if you're trying to avoid the forbidden fats, then you may want to be careful regarding ground meat, because you don't really know what goes in there. The same with any kinds of sausages or hot dogs or stuff like that. You don't know what part of the animal is going in there, and they may be mixing in these forbidden fats. I have no idea, because I'm not a butcher. I'm not an expert in meat. I'm just saying in a general sense that unless you know exactly what portion of the meat you're getting, and you know it doesn't contain forbidden fats, then there's a possibility, at least from a theoretical point of view. Again, practically speaking, I don't know what parts of the animal they usually put in these hot dogs, sausages, ground meat. I think in some of the hot dogs they'll put pretty much anything, like noses and feet and brains and God knows what. So good chance they might also put the forbidden fats in there. But you have to be careful. If you eat meat, then you have to know exactly what portions of the animal are in the meat and make sure you're not eating these forbidden fats. Okay. לא תאכלו בכל מושבותיכם, לעוף ולבהמה. And you shall not eat the blood. Throughout all of your habitations, you shall not eat the blood from the... Hold on one second. I'm going to just do one thing very quickly. Oh, come on. Go. Go. Put the cat out. Okay. So you're not allowed to eat the blood from what? From birds and from mammals is basically what this means, okay? So this answers an important question. We know we're not supposed to eat the blood of animals, and a lot of times I get the question, what about the blood of fish? Does that include the blood of fish? And we see here that it does not include the blood of fish, okay? It includes the blood of higher level animals. The highest level animals are, besides human beings, are the mammals. And then after that, we have the birds. Okay. I think anyone who has any sense of being around animals knows that there's a certain pecking order, no pun intended, to how close to human beings, if you want to put it that way, or how high level organisms certain types of animals are. The mammals are definitely the highest. And after that, we have the birds. After that, I guess you have the reptiles. And then maybe after that, you have the fish. And of course, I'm not including mammals that live in the ocean like whales and dolphins. But so there's a certain pecking order to the sophistication or to the level of animals, and so therefore this prohibition against eating blood, Leviticus 7:26 specifically says that it refers to birds and to mammals. Okay, that leaves out fish. There are types of fish we can eat. It leaves out we're not allowed to eat any reptiles. All reptiles are off limits to us. We are allowed to eat insects, right? Such as locusts and grasshoppers. Do they have blood? I don't know. I'd have to think back to remember if they have blood. If they do, then there's no problem eating their blood. Okay. But for fish and for fish, I'm sorry, for birds and for mammals, we are not allowed to eat the blood. Okay. 1 second here, please. Let me just do something very quickly. And this is a question that comes up all the time. What about the blood of fish? Well, Leviticus 7:26 seems to imply that it's not a problem to eat the blood of fish. Okay, that's not considered. That is not considered one of the forbidden types of blood. It's a low enough form of an animal that it doesn't count in the prohibition against eating the blood of the animal. Okay. And anyone who eats any blood, any of the blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. So anyone who eats either bird blood or mammal blood, then that person shall be cut off from his people. Excision shall be cut out of the nation of Israel. Keep in mind also, fish are never offered on the altar, right? They're not acceptable sacrifices. The only types of animals that are acceptable sacrifices on the altar of Yahweh are mammals and birds. Fish are considered too low a form of life to be offered on the altar. You don't toss a tilapia on God's altar, and boy, it would stink the place up anyway, right? Okay, so that's what we see there. And I get this question all the time: can you eat the blood of fish? Answer: yes, it's not forbidden because it's not high enough form. It's not high enough form of life in order for it to be prohibited. Okay, let's go on now to verse 28. See if there's any commentary that might be interesting. So Robert Alter says, verse 26, this introduction. So in all your dwelling places, we saw that in Leviticus 7:26, you're not supposed to eat the blood of birds or, let me close this out, of birds or or mammals. Okay, so it's in no way restricted to animals or even categories of animals sacrificed in the cult, but is comprehensively binding on the Israelites wherever they dwell. And that's very important. Okay, and that also applies to the forbidden fats. Why is that important? Because the rabbis say that you can eat forbidden fats as long as it's not part of one of the animals, the actual animals that are sacrificed to Yahweh. So if you kill a cow, but you have no intention of sacrificing to Yahweh, the rabbis say you can eat the forbidden fats because it's not a sacrifice. And I think this and other verses we've seen clearly indicate that that's not the case. Just like you're not allowed to eat blood, the blood of the animal, whether it's a sacrifice or not, you're also not allowed to eat the forbidden fats of an animal, whether it's a sacrifice or not. Okay? All right. Let's finish off chapter 7 and then we'll stop. Go for another maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. Verse 28, וידבר יהוה אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, המקריב את זבח שלמה ליהוה, יביא את קורבנו ליהוה מזבח שלמה. Okay. That's almost seems redundant. Let's see if we can get some commentary on that. So he who brings forward his communion sacrifice to the Lord shall bring his offering to the Lord from his communion sacrifice. Let me see if I can even pick up what they're trying to say in English here, what Torah is trying to say. He who brings forward his communion sacrifice to the Lord. I don't know. I honestly have never really gotten that verse. It seems almost redundant, right? Even in the English. So in Hebrew, דבר בן ישראל לאמור, המקריב את זבח שלמה ליהוה, יביא את קורבנו ליהוה מזבח שלמה. I really don't know what that's trying to say. I'll be 100% honest, and I don't want to pick apart commentaries right now. So we're just going to move on, and maybe following verses will give some context. Verse 30, ידעו תביאנה את אישי יהוה, את החלב על החזה יביאנה את החזה להניף אותו תנופה לפני יהוה. אוקיי, דבר בני ישראל לאמור, המקריב את זבח שלמה ליהוה, יביא את קורבנו ליהוה מזבח שלמה. יביא את קורבנו ליהוה מזבח שלמה. Okay, so let me just translate this verse 30. ידעו תביאנה את אישי יהוה. So his hands shall bring it. His hand shall bring the fire offerings of Yahweh. Et chelev, so the forbidden fats which are on the chest, he shall bring. On the breast, he shall bring. Et chazeh. And the chest and the breast itself, lanif oto tnufa lifnei Yahweh, and he shall wave it as a wave offering before Yahweh. Let's go on. והתיר הכהן את החלב המזבחה, והיה החזה לאהרון ולבניו. So the forbidden fats shall be thrown on the altar to go up in smoke, and the breast is given as a gift to Aaron and his sons. In other words, to the Kohanim. ואת שוק הימין תיתנו תרומה לכהן מזבחי שלמיכם. And the loin, or how they translate it here, the thigh, the right thigh, you shall give as a gift, as a donation to the Kohen, to the priest, mizivchei shlamechem, from your peace offerings, your peace sacrifices. Verse 33, hamakriv et dam shlamim vo et achelev mivnei Aaron. Okay, so the person from among the sons of Aaron, in other words, the priest, The priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering and who throws the forbidden fats onto the altar, lo tieh shok hayamim limana. So that right thigh shall be for him as a portion. We'll sum this up, but let's move on a little bit. Verse 34. Ki et hazeh hatnufa wa et shok atruma lakachti me'et bnei Israel mizivchei. Okay, now it's starting to come together. Mizivchei shalamehem ve'eten otam la'aron ha'kohen u'lamav lachok olam me'et bnei Israel. Because the breast of waving, of the wave offering, and the thigh, meaning the right thigh, shok atruma, the thigh that is given as a donation, lakachti me'et bnei Israel, I have taken away from the children of Israel, I've taken from the children of Israel, mizivchei shalamehem, from their peace offerings, ve'eten otam le'aron hakohen, and I've given them to Aaron the priest, u'levanav, and to his sons, lechok olam, as an eternal statute, me'et bnei Israel, from the children of Israel, regarding the children of Israel, from the children of Israel. Okay, so let's sum up here. I want to read this again, and now I think it's going to start to come together and make more sense. Okay, we'll start in verse 29. Daber el bnei Israel lemor. Okay, so we'll start here. Makriv et zevach shlamao liyahweh, yavi et kormano liyahweh mi zevach shlamao. So anyone who brings a peace offering to Yahweh, so he has to bring, basically it's saying that anyone who brings a peace offering has to bring the portions to Yahweh that are allotted to him from this peace offering. Okay? Yadao tiviena et ishe Yahweh. So his own hands shall bring the fire offering, this fire offering of Yahweh. So basically, the person who brings the peace offering, he's the one who's supposed to take these portions that don't belong to him. Remember, anyone can eat of the peace offerings, but certain portions are now going to be set aside for the priests. That's hence the headline, the priest portion, and that's what these verses are going to tell us. Okay, so et hachelev al chazeh yavieno et hachazeh lahanif oto tnufa lifnei Yahweh. Okay, so now this is starting to all come together and make some sense. Okay, so we're talking about, so remember we saw up above that for the peace offering, regular non-Kohanim, as long as they're in a state of ritual purity, they're allowed to eat of the peace offerings, but there's certain portions of the peace offering which belong to the Kohanim. And now we're finding out which those are. Okay, so there's the breast and there's the fat around the breast. So the person who has brought the peace offering, he has to bring the breast and the fat that's around the breast, and he waves it as a wave offering before Yahweh, sometimes called an elevation offering. Okay, so either it's waved up and down or it's lifted up, symbolically giving it up to Yahweh. And then so it's the breast and the fat around the breast. The fat around the breast is thrown on the altar to go up and smoke. And the breast itself is given to Aaron and his sons. In other words, it's given to the Kohanim. Then we have the right thigh. And so the right thigh you shall give as a donation to the priest from among your peace offerings. So besides the chest, the breast, and the fat around the breast, also the right thigh is going to go to, and we'll see, Hamakriv et dam shlamim et chelev amivnei Aaron lo tieshok hayamim lemana. So that right thigh goes to the Kohen who actually performed the sacrifice. Okay, so the person brings the sacrifice, he brings these portions, or he slaughters the animal. Okay, we saw in all cases the person himself is slaughtering the animal. And then he takes the portions that belong to the Kohanim and to God, and he brings them to the Kohen. The Kohen does the rest of the offering, and the Kohen takes the forbidden fats, throws it on the altar, and then he takes for himself the breast, and he takes for himself the right thigh. Except the breast goes to all of the children of Aaron. It's distributed for all of the Kohanim, but the right thigh goes specifically to the Kohen who is officiating for this particular sacrifice. That's what these verses are saying. Okay. לקחתי מאת בני ישראל, מזבחי שלמיהם, ויתן אותם לארון הכהן ובניו לחוק עולם מאת בני ישראל. Because the breast that is to be waved, the breast wave offering, and the right thigh that is to be donated, I've taken from the children of Israel, from the peace offerings, the peace sacrifices, and I've given them to Aaron the Kohen and to his sons as an eternal statute from the children of Israel. I've taken away from the children of Israel. Okay, so basically, what this is saying in a nutshell is, although the rest of the animal is allowed to be eaten by a regular Israelite as long as he's in a state of ritual purity, then of course the fats get thrown on the altar. They always do. But the chest, the breast is brought is waved up and down, or is lifted up, and then is given to the Kohanim to be split among all the Kohanim, and the right thigh is given to the Kohen who actually helped perform the sacrifice, helped the layman, the lay Israelite, perform the sacrifice. Okay, so that's what this is saying. Okay, it's the right side of the animal. So just like I have a right hand, so animals have a right thigh. Okay. Okay, so Zot Mishchat. Let's see how Robert Alter translates this one. So we're in 35. So translates it as the allotment. Here it's translated as consecrated portion. Okay, fine. It works either way. And Everett Fox translates that as, that's 35. So Leviticus 7:35. The anointed share. Okay, got it. So he, so okay, we'll go with Everett Fox. I don't want to get into why now, but again, this is related to anointing. So this is the anointed share. Everett Fox translates it as. I think that's the best translation of them. This is the anointed share of Aaron and the anointed share of his sons, Me'ishe Yahweh, from among the fire offerings of Yahweh. Yom ikriv otam lekohen leYahweh. On the day that it is brought, or that an Israelite brings it to the Kohen for Yahweh. Verse 36, Asher tziwa Yahweh latet lahem b'yom mashcho otam me'et b'nei Yisrael chukat olam ledorotam, which Yahweh commanded to give them on the day of their inauguration, literally their anointing them, me'et b'nei Israel, from the children of Israel, chukat olam ledorotam. Okay. I just want to parse this again in my head. So Mishchat Aaron Mishchat Bana Me'ishe Yahweh B'yom Hikriv Otam Lekahene. I'm sorry, I misunderstood this. Let me go over this. These are some technical verses. So okay, this is talking about the inauguration of the Kohanim. Okay. Zot Mishchat Aaron Mishchat Bana Me'ishe Yahweh B'yom Hikriv Otam Lekahen LeYahweh Shetziwa Yahweh Latet Lahem Yom Mashcho Otam Me'et B'nei Yisrael Chukat Olam Ledorotam. Okay. Okay, 1 second here. Let me just get this. Zot Mishchat Aaron Mishchat Bana Mish. 1 second. Just 1 second, please. So these are summary sentences. That's what's going on here. Okay. So let me restate that. Zot Mishchat Aaron Mishchat Bana Me'ishe Yahweh B'yom Ikriv Otam Lekahen LeYahweh. So these are the portions that are given at the anointing of Aaron and the anointing of his sons from among the fire offerings of Yahweh on the day that he brought them close. In other words, on the day that Yahweh brought them close to serve as priests to Yahweh. So this is a summary sentence. Asher tziwa Yahweh latet lahem b'yom mashcho otam, which Yahweh commanded to give to them on the day of their anointing, their inauguration, of inaugurating them. Me'et b'nei Israel, from the children of Israel, chukat olam ledorotam. This is an eternal statute from throughout their their generations. Okay, 1 second. 1 second again. Okay, so I think actually what this is saying basically, this is kind of a summary sentence, and this is saying that on the day that Yahweh inaugurated the Kohanim as priests, then this now, all of the stuff we've seen here, this now becomes their portion. Okay, this becomes their portion, this stuff that we said above. And then here we have a summary sentence of everything that we've learned pretty much from Leviticus 1 through Leviticus 7. Zot Torah le'olah, lemincha, lechatat, le'asham, u'lemiluim, u'lezevach hashlamim. So these are the instructions. This is the instruction manual. So this is a typical Torah summary sentence. This is now summing up everything. This is basically closing the unit of study that we began in Leviticus 1, and it's a summary sentence, which is very typical of the Torah. When a set of instructions finishes, then there's usually a summary sentence, and that's what this is. So Zot the Torah, this is the instruction manual for the burnt offering, as we're calling it, the fully burnt or the Holocaust offering, for the grain offering or the grain on fire offering, the grain offering that's thrown onto the altar, the Chatat, the sin offering, as we're calling it, the recompense from inadvertent sin offering, La Asham, and that's the recompense for financial transgressions offering, U La Miluim, and that's the offerings that were brought on the day of the inauguration of the Kohanim, U LeZevach HaShlamim, and the peace offerings or the communion offering. So this is a summary sentence of everything that we've learned from chapter 1 through chapter 7. Asher tziwa Yahweh et Moshe Behar Sinai, which Yahweh commanded Moses on Mount Sinai, b'yom sa'oto et bnei Israel lakriv et korbanechem leYahweh b'midbar Sinai, on the day that he commanded the children of Israel how to bring their sacrifices to Yahweh when they were in the desert, when they were in the Sinai desert. So this is basically a summary sentence. So this is a summary sentence of, this is a summary sentence of this paragraph here. Okay? And this last sentence is a summary sentence of all of Leviticus 1 through 7. This sums up everything that we've learned through Leviticus 1 through 7, and this basically closes the unit that we started a number of weeks ago regarding the sacrifices. So this is it. We have finished that unit of study. We finished that unit of study. And we'll decide what we're going to do next. But this basically sums up the unit of study from Leviticus 1 through Leviticus 7. Okay? And this again is the summary sentence. So what is there to say in summary? What we could say is there are certainly a lot of laws, but they all fit into a very beautiful whole. They all fit into a very beautiful system that all works together. When you study them as an entire system, they make a lot of sense. They make a lot of logical sense. They're not just random laws. They make sense. Okay, you see like the system coming together, where everything kind of works together to form one beautiful system. Okay, there are many examples of that, but maybe one example that we saw here is that for a peace offering, which is a good offering, a positive offering, then the person who brings it is actually allowed to eat it, or just regular lay Israelites are allowed to eat it. And yes, the Kohanim get their portion, and yes, God gets his portion. But because it's a positive offering, it doesn't have these restrictions upon it. Whereas on the other hand, we saw, for instance, a sin offering, that if it's the more serious sin offerings, which is a sin offering is a negative offering, then if it's the more serious sin offering, such as the Kohen Gadol sinning or the entire people sinning, then none of it is eaten at all. Everything is burnt and brought out to the ash pile outside of the camp. Okay, so things actually kind of come together and make sense if you study the system as a whole. What I would like to do, and I don't know if I'll have time to do it, but I really would like to, is summarize all of this in a giant chart and see, and maybe to help get an idea of how the whole system works together. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to end the unit here. And I think we're going to end the study here. Let's see. It's been about 3 hours. So let me ask if there are any comments or any questions. Yeah, it would be a great wall chart. And a big one too. And a big one too. What I would recommend, so if I were teaching this like as a university professor, I would now say your homework assignment is to read through Leviticus chapters 1 through 7 in English or in your preferred language, and read through it 3 times. And then there would be a quiz on it. We're not going to do a quiz, but I would recommend maybe reading through it a couple of times, Leviticus 1 through 7, not going crazy over it, not trying to understand every single law, but reading through it kind of, from beginning to end, just to see how the whole system works together, to see how the 5 different types of offerings work together, to see what portions are thrown on the fire, what are given to the Kohanim, what are allowed to be eaten by lay people, lay Israelites, what are to be taken out of the camp altogether and burnt on the ash pile, and to get an idea of how the whole system works together, because it really is a beautiful system. But I think I've had enough for today. There've been a lot of distractions which have thrown me off a little bit, but that's okay. But we've finished this unit, and now I have to decide what we're going to do next. It's very possible that we'll just continue on to Leviticus 8, or it's possible that what we'll do is start the next most important unit, and I'm kind of leaning in that direction, which is going to be I guess starting in Leviticus 11. Yes, starting in Leviticus 11, which is the unit on clean and unclean, or ritual purity and ritual impurity. Maybe we'll even skip chapter 11, I'm not sure yet, and start in chapter 12, because this is really where it speaks about the issues of purity and impurity, okay? Then we get into leprosy and a whole bunch of different things. So maybe that's what we'll do, or maybe we'll just continue on in the Torah where we left off. In other words, starting next time with Leviticus 8. I will think about it. I'm not sure. But one thing that seems to be for sure is we've definitely deviated from the weekly portion. And so I might not, instead of saying that we're going to study the weekly portion of the rabbis, I might just say what we're actually going to study. And we may slow down and go slower in the Torah, so that we can learn, a bit more in detail, right? We can think of it as kind of an ongoing, college course or master class in which I'm learning as well. Every time I read through, I learn more in Leviticus. So let's see what we'll do. We'll decide. If anyone has any input, please let me know. But in the meantime, I think we're going to end it for today. Are there any final questions or comments? So homework assignment, read through Leviticus 1 through 7 in English 3 times. Not getting bogged down, you don't have to make long charts or anything like that. Just read it through 3 times. And I really think you'll get an idea of how the whole system works together. Okay? All right. Okay, everyone. So I'm going to end it here. I'll put on some music. I'll let you guys chat among yourselves for a while. And we will see you again soon. Be'ezrat Yahweh. We'll see you again next week for another Torah study. And in the meantime, I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. All right. Let's get some music going here.
רעה וינוס הירדן ייסוב לאחור ההרים רקדו חלים גבעות Glory, glory, glory.